What can you do that screams, "I make terrible financial decisions"? Oh, we've been dating for 3 months. Of course, let's join bank accounts. You know those ads on Craigslist that are trying to sell a car for exactly what they paid for it? Yeah, those. Take over my payments, please. I used to work at GameStop. I had a customer that bought a PlayStation because a particular exclusive game came out for it. Then they'd trade the system and game back in to buy an Xbox when a new exclusive came out for that about a month later, and would go back and forth trading the respective consoles and games in every few months. I tried to convince him just to own each system and buy the games for each when they release, because he was losing so much money doing what he was doing. His response was that he couldn't afford to buy both at the same time. I didn't have the brightest customers. I worked at a store called Vintage Stock. It's a lot like GameStop. We had people that did that for us too. We were in the same strip mall as GameStop, and we paid out less cash than they did. A guy came in saying he was playing our system by buying our cheap crap and selling it to GameStop, like buying a used PlayStation 4 from us for like $300 and selling it to GameStop for like $100 instead of to us for $80. Like, you didn't make $20, you spent $200, dude. What the frick? Buying something really expensive like a motorcycle or a nice rifle, and then deciding you're tired of it and reselling it for half the price only a week later. I knew a guy who did exactly that, and it was astonishing. It's like, dude, you just lost thousands. Introduce me to this guy. We're into the same stuff, and I love a good deal. When you ask them how much they paid for something, and they only know how much it costs them in monthly payments. This is a great example. I didn't realize how many people must do this. I bought a truck years ago, and after test driving it, I told the salesperson that I'd buy it if, after my trade-in, the loan on the new truck was $10,000 or less. He agreed. They wrote up my paperwork, and they said, "Hey, the payment is only X amount. That's less than what you were looking for. Isn't that great?" So I replied, "Yeah, but what's the total loan amount?" "Oh, I don't know. I'd have to look." So he digs through the documents, and the loan was like $12,000. I pretty much told them to get bent or take $2,000 off that loan amount. They ended up dropping it down to the $10,000 I'd told them I was willing to pay. I'm assuming, however, that many people wouldn't have given the loan amount a second thought after hearing the payment was lower than they were expecting. This is why the narrator runs all of his biggest financial decisions past other, smarter humans before he commits. I'm too dumb to be trusted with this sort of thing, but also smart enough to know that I'm too dumb. If a deal seems too good to be true, check it with a smart person. And when salespeople offer you something like this, put your hands over your ears and sing loudly. So, I worked at a grocery store for 8 years, and the one thing I saw a lot of, unfortunately, was people putting food back for cigarettes when they had kids. We didn't sell lottery tickets or alcohol, but other stores in town did, and I heard the same stories from them. I worked at a store that people could sell their nerdy stuff, like games, comics, old toys, and movies in, for a little bit of cash or for even more store credit. Too often, you'd have people that reeked of crystal or cigarettes selling their kids' movies. When I'd tell them that for their collection of 10 children's movies, I'd give them $4 cash or $6 store credit, they'd usually say something like, "Give me the cash. I gotta get smokes and I don't get paid for a few more days." I'm like, what the frick? It just makes me so sad to know that a child is being raised into that. I am a loan officer. A guy called in, 18, fresh out of high school, first job, Pizza Hut, been at it 3 months. Needed a car. Wanted us to finance it. He was calling from the Maserati dealership. Jesus Christ! I know a guy who makes $80,000 a year, military pension, couple of private pensions, and has a Porsche for the weekends, and he still thinks Maserati is too expensive. When someone emphasizes how much they saved versus how much they spent. Look what I got. Originally $25,000, but I got it for $5,000. I saved $20,000. No, you spent $5,000. In Western Australia, it looks like this. Get laid off by the mining company that was initially paying you well, specifically because it wasn't a secure position, but never mind that. They'd already taken out like $600,000 loan on a house, an $80,000 loan on a sick V8 Commodore, plus another $10,000 putting in performance cams and straight through exhaust so you can pull mad skids, and this is all on the justification that I'll be able to smash those loans out in a couple of years on the salary, eh? Oh, frick. Got laid off. What do I do now? Oh, what's that? Tickets to Bali, a $300 return? Better take the family for a booze-fueled, cheap crap-buying bonanza. That's fine, we'll just remortgage the house. Dead frickin' easy. I used to live paycheck to paycheck. Now I live direct deposit to direct deposit. Cadillac Escalade that never has more than a quarter tank of gas. 20 grand in credit card debt at nearly 20% APR. I used to know a guy who was renowned for making bad decisions in general. To be fair, he was funny and had a heart of gold, he just wasn't a logical thinker. He never had any savings, he was always buying his girlfriend of the month pretty or expensive things, and always mooching off his mum. One of the more flawed decisions that always stuck with me was when his car broke down. It was a piece of junk, so it was bound to happen. No biggie. He was feeling pretty blue because, as well as a collection of other things that had happened around the same time, largely through his own choices. So, he decided that in order to finally become a winner, he needed to look and feel like a winner. And do you know what makes you look and feel like a winner? Owning a brand new Chrysler. He was so excited about it, he could feel good things coming his way already. He picked the one he wanted, it was 70 grand Australian dollars. He spoke to the dealer and organized when he was going to come in and do the paperwork. Everything was looking great for him. Then, when he went to the dealership to sort it all out, it turned out he hadn't been in his current job for long enough, so the loan, which he'd elected to do through the dealership, couldn't be approved. He came back looking pretty defeated, but in my opinion, being declined that loan was one of the luckiest things to happen to him. That man should not be in charge of his own money. When they're always broke, but they always have green herb at the same time. Carrying forward debt from your last car loan into your current car loan. Unwilling to write down what they wrote checks for. My boss's charity just sent out the legally required receipts for charitable donations. Each receipt says, "Thank you for your donation of X amount to charity name." It's so that people can list it as a charitable donation on their taxes, so we have a list in the event of an audit. I fielded no fewer than a dozen calls this week along the lines of, "What's this receipt for? I didn't write a check." And nobody's polite about it either. They're all in full-blown panic mode. I have photocopies of their checks with the check numbers, which I send them. And suddenly they remember that check they wrote all of a week ago, but somehow never wrote down in their checkbook or whatever system they use. Seriously, people, pay attention. Asking your friends on Facebook for $250 to pay your bills, then posting the pics the next day of you at the movie theater with $40 in snacks. I have a friend who asks to borrow more than she actually needs so that she can still go out and party. For example, she might only need $200, but she'll ask for $300 so that she has an extra $100 to go buy booze and party with. And a lot of you are asking if she pays back. She's always paid me back. I'm not sure about the many others, but I wouldn't be surprised. But her payments are always late to me. It took her nearly 3 months after the date she'd told me she'd be able to pay me back the $100 I lent her. I've also witnessed her borrow money from someone to pay back someone else. I have reason to believe that she doesn't pay some of her family back like her mum or brother because they always give it to her no matter what. She always borrows money from people. It's a regular, weekly thing for her. Just bought 24-karat gold-plated playing cards. They were only $12 on Groupon, but it does look bad. I have a friend who has 95 grand in student loan debt, 23 grand credit card debt, and a 50 grand wedding on the horizon. Her dad pays for her school loan. He's paying for the wedding too. The original budget was 30 grand, got raised to 50 grand. Here's the kicker. He said, "I'll give you 50 grand for a down payment on a house or 50 grand for your wedding." And she picked the wedding. Infuriating. And yes, her dad will absolutely end up paying the down payment on her future house. It makes me just so... more money than sense. Yeah, it sure is easier to feel contempt for people who are that mix of rich, stupid, and careless with other people's money. At least when it's someone who's been stuck in a bit of a hole their entire lives, you can put it down to ignorance or maybe a lack of opportunity. But yeah, this money could have changed so many lives. Setting up a GoFundMe account to get their Facebook friends to pay for their wedding instead of opting for a simpler wedding, or having a longer engagement, or eloping now and having the big party later, while still going out to dinner every other night and taking expensive trips. Lifted truck with balding tires. Okay, this one might get ranty because I just need to vent it out. One of my colleagues is probably the nicest man on the planet. He's kind, considerate, and loyal. You couldn't write a movie script for a better person. No Rhodes Scholar, but very hardworking and liked by everyone. Almost every person in his life takes horrendous advantage of him. I can tell that he deeply fears being rejected by his loved ones and craves their approval and acceptance. But it has crossed a line. They have a joint income of over $150K, yet they're circling the drain in debt and can barely pay any bills. They live in credit. His wife is usually a decent person, but when she says jump, he asks how high. This has resulted in numerous luxury shopping trips, her mother moving in and being a complete leech on their lives, vacations, and they just had to buy 2 brand new vehicles last year with all the bells and whistles. They can barely pay the mortgage and the house is a mid-sized fixer-upper. At least every week or two he comes in and I force out of him the latest thing they spent way too much money on. Almost everything is in payment installments, even their utility bills. He pays for 5 cell phones. He usually can't drive his truck because there's no gas in it. In the summer, we have barbecues every week for about $3 to $5. Hot dogs are cheaper than burgers. And there are times he just doesn't have the $3. A 45-year-old man with a 6-figure income that doesn't have $3 2 days after payday. Thankfully, his kids are clueless that there's a problem, as it should be. They're kids and don't need adult problems. They get whatever they need from school. My concern is that one day the bubble will burst. Repo companies will come in, creditors are calling, and they're precariously close to the edge at all times. All I can do is encourage him to get therapy and learn to say no. But I can't force it. Okay, update. Lots of good advice from people coming in, good to hear from other people on the other side of the fence, and it's giving me a new perspective. His youngest 2 kids are pre-teens. Not sure I want to tell them about the magnitude of the problem, just let them enjoy a few years of being kids. Second update, for frick's sake. I was chatting with him at the end of the workday. Apparently they're using the tax refund they assume they're getting, and the whole family is going to Mexico for spring break. Frick. I told him to sell his truck or find a cardboard box to live in. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Complaining on Facebook that you can't afford the $200 it will take to cover your kids' school supplies this year, but also posting a daily pic of your Starbucks drink. $800 car, $2,000 rims. Trying to pay 2 mortgages, but you also spend hundreds of dollars on video game loot boxes and virtual cards for a mobile phone game. Treating the limit on their credit card as money that they already have. For example, they have a $5,000 limit on a new card and immediately think they could buy with $5,000, and then opening a new credit card when they run out of that $5,000. I used to be a cashier at a store which had their own credit card that could only be used at that store. Most of the credit applications I processed were either denied or given very low credit limits because those cards attract people with the worst financial decisions. Get your tax refund and completely forget about the last 11 months of poverty you just experienced while you talk yourself into a brand new 65-inch TV that you'll inevitably pawn off to pay your water bill. Maybe I'm being too specific here. Buying a rundown hotel with bedbugs, mold, and a broken pool, and then spending $27,000 on new signs with over half your savings. Hotel Impossible episode that I saw recently. In my part of the world, it's the newly hired kids on the oil rigs. When the market is booming, they go out and buy a truck with a $1,000 monthly payment, then buy a house with a $3,000 monthly payment. Then, when the market drops, they lose it all and their credit ends up ruined. So it's harder to find a decent car or place to live. Okay, I'm copying in this golden oldie from the finance Reddit. I'm in high school and money was stolen from my bank account. I need help now. I'm in high school, I just finished my frosh year, and I'm supposed to go on a big trip this summer. I didn't have any money and my parents didn't want me to have a lot of cash anyway, so they set me up with my first bank account and put $1,000 in it. It came with an ATM card and some checks. The checks were really cool. I never had anything like them before. But I was kind of sad because I didn't have anything to use them for. I had a lot of friends over last week and I showed them the checks, and they all thought they were really cool too. I got the idea that I could give my friends some souvenir checks. I told them that these were only souvenirs. We had a blast that day. I was acting like a billionaire and making jokes, asking people how much money they needed, and then writing them a fake check. I kept telling them that it was all fake and they couldn't cash the checks. Because some of my friends are idiots, I got a text today from one guy saying he tried to cash a check and the bank wouldn't give him money. I told him, "What the frick are you doing trying to cash the check after I told you not to?" I went to the bank this afternoon to sort it out and I asked them how much money was in the account. They said that there was nothing left in the account and that I owed them money for fees. I felt like I was going to faint or throw up. So I got out of there as fast as I could. I didn't explain the situation to them. I need to fix this without my parents finding out. Do I talk to the police first or do I talk to the bank first about the stolen money? I'm in Michigan, by the way. Update. Okay, thanks everyone for the advice. I still feel like I should try going to the cops, but every time I wanted to, I kept getting nervous and chickened out. That lasted about a whole day, and then it turns out my dad got a call from the bank and he went absolutely ape crap. They stopped all the checks and took my checkbook away. I have no idea if they got the money back from my friends. My dad left for work for a week and he's not talking to me. I probably won't see him for a while because I leave for my trip this week and I'll be gone for a while. I'm only getting $300 for the trip this time instead of the $1,000, but I guess that makes sense that I'm punished somehow. Biggest lesson learned? Don't mess around with the checkbook, or if you need to, make sure to write void on the checks. Well, we can give you the benefit of the doubt and put that extreme blunder down to your relative youth. Your parents probably should have given you some sort of talk about how to use a checkbook, but even then, folks, checks have signatures and stuff on them, and they're more or less a contract that you're giving the other party that money. Don't be silly with them, he says in 2025 when nobody uses checks anymore. Rent-a-center. Heard a coworker talking about their new bong, and she showed me a picture of it on a table with burn marks. I asked why it was so burnt, and she said, Rent-a-center's on my butt because I haven't paid yet, but I don't want to. I shouldn't have to pay for a burnt table. I replied, why would they even rent it to you like that? And she says, well, they're buttholes. I told them I burnt it and they won't even give me a discount or anything. They want more. This witch's new glass pipe cost more than a table I now own off Craigslist, and she's $200 in debt for a table that she can't even keep. I still think about that interaction maybe twice a week. When you're part of a multi-level marketing company and you, quote, own your own business. Bonus points for using guilt. In college, I was always behind on my rent because I'd spend all of my money on green herb and Italian cheese bread from Little Caesars. I'd get super baked, get the munchies, and order an Italian cheese bread. This was a daily thing for years, and I eventually got evicted. I must have spent close to $50,000 on Mary J and Italian cheese bread by my sophomore year. Anyways, that's not my answer. My sister owns a Coach purse. Eating out for lunch every single day and complaining about how poor or broke you are. No crap, Sandra, was that peanut and chicken kale salad with a side of pasta and extra bakery treat really worth it? Brand new car, no savings, putting things on credit because they don't have money for it. Buying things you don't really need just because it's on sale. And to clarify, I'm talking about non-necessity items. Food, hygiene products and stuff are a good idea to buy when it's on sale even if you don't need them at the moment. Questioning you on savings. When you let a friend know how much you have saved and they ask you why you aren't spending more, because if I spent it, I wouldn't have any saved. That's how frickin' savings work. Recently got in an argument with a friend about this. They accidentally saw my bank statement. My fault, I forgot to put it away before they came to my place. Since they discovered what I have in savings, they're always going back to it when I refuse an activity because I find that activity too expensive. I'm saving to pay for driving lessons and then buy a new car. To me, this money isn't mine. It's the dealerships and driving instructors, so I can't spend it. I even tried to explain that to them that it's to pay for future debts, like credit and reverse, because sometimes weird stuff works, and they still don't understand the concept. When someone rents an apartment in a crap part of town, but drives a very expensive car with a stereo setup that you can hear, nay, feel, from half a mile away. A guy that I worked with, he sold his phone to pay his rent. He got like $40 for it. Spent the next month without a phone, unable to do business properly because he didn't have a way for people to contact him. He told me he was short on rent and living check to check every month. Later, he told me he plans on taking out a $4,000 loan. $2,000 of it were to buy an old car he liked, and the other $2,000 was to revamp it. He decided he wanted to start breeding pit bulls, so he paid $300 for a pit bull that then didn't mate with his female and was later run over. He decided to buy 2 Indian ringnecks, birds, just because. He wanted a pet and then had to buy a proper cage and toys, and now has to buy bird food and generally do upkeep on them. He later sold one to cover his rent. He also told me multiple stories about how whenever he came up with some extra cash, he'd spend it by the next day. He was proud of this too. He told me how he once got $100 from a family member and then used it within the same night to have a steak dinner and go out for dessert afterwards. When customers would leave him tips, he'd use it to buy takeout food that night. He bought a cat. Full stop. And when he eventually got a phone, he bought one for about $500, which was more than his paycheck. He told me he once wanted to give his wife money, but she told him to keep it because she didn't want to spend it, so he literally just threw it away. Those people who never buy groceries and buy every meal and snack as they please. Anytime I see someone who makes less than $25K a year buy a brand new car rather than a well-cared-for used one, I judge them just a bit. I work at the bank. Literally 95% of people's expenses come from food and eating out. Now, that doesn't mean that someone is necessarily financially illiterate, but by simply making their own food and getting a coffee machine, most people can save the majority of their paychecks. Also, having a credit card that offers no rewards. There's so many with no annual fee. Get one of those instead. Full-time students on financial aid who buy Starbucks every single morning. And not just coffee, it's always lattes and frappuccinos and crap.
Cosplayers of Reddit, what's the cringiest interaction you've had at an event? By the way, there's going to be a lot of character names in this video. I apologize in advance if I say them wrong. Was cosplaying Black Cat from Spider-Man. It was a very tight and form-fitting costume, and I opted not to wear underwear because you could very clearly see the lines in the costume if I did. Had some guy come up behind me and unzip my suit, which wouldn't have been so bad if the zipper didn't go all the way down to the bottom of my butt. For 10 seconds, my pale back and butt were very exposed. Dude, this is 100% not okay. Yeah, and the security was non-existent. It was just staff, mostly female, and nothing was done. It was a cute little con, and it was in its first year, I think. They didn't know what to expect, and it probably wasn't that. Unless you're going to a major convention, I'd expect security and staff to be pretty bad. I would assume most of the budget would go to securing talent for the cons, so the rest is a free-for-all. But screw the guy that did this to this cosplayer. I witnessed a sussy bear cosplay that is associated with kidnapping children throw a little girl over his shoulder and run off. Little girl was fine, but later told me and the group that we had been dancing with she didn't know the guy, so that's pretty sus. It was probably some idiot being in character for laughs. That said, he's lucky he didn't get killed. Jesus, dude, you're going to pretend to kidnap a child? Yeah, this type of behavior at cons is all too common and needs to stop. I think it's gotten better over the years, at least I hope it has, but being in character half the time feels like an excuse for people to be creepy or jerks. Looking at you, weird Deadpools. So I went to my first con a few years ago. I wasn't brave enough to dress up, so I wanted to take pics instead. I saw a really amazing Doctor Who cosplay, so I asked him for a hug and a pic. He was really enthusiastic about it, and we had a pic ready to go until I heard a gruff, "Hurry up, other people want a hug too." This large middle-aged lady in a tight tank top was giving us this glare. Legit, the cosplayer went from happy to miserable as soon as we took the pic. Like, holy cow, these cosplayers aren't props, they're people. Don't demand physical contact, you have to ask. He definitely didn't give up a hug for her. On the bright side, this year I will be doing a dress-up cosplay, and I hope that it'll be fine. I dressed up as the 11th Doctor at San Diego Comic-Con one year, and I saw a vendor wearing a fez, and so I said nice fez in passing, but I thought he didn't hear me, so I just walked by him. But then I heard a sonic screwdriver noise from behind me, and it was the guy with the fez, and I used my sonic to signal back. It was pretty awesome. This was kinda cringy and hilarious. So at my first con I was dressed as Silk Spectre 2, comic book version. I was still using my cane because I was only a year out from my accident. This guy decides that obviously I'm his one true love or something, and I'm not able to hustle away fast enough to escape easily. I lose him a few times, but he keeps popping up and hitting on me, and making comments about how I should have been Silk Spectre 1. This is at least 2 or 3 hours of this Romeo following me around. Well, somehow I managed to lose him, and I end up asking this beefy old dude if he minds that I take the preoccupied chair at his table, since my hips and legs are acting up. Half an hour later, we are chatting and having a good old time when my Romeo shows up. Romeo looks at me, Romeo looks at beefy old guy looks at me, and I guess I must have looked scared or creeped out or something because the beefy old guy stands up and leans real close to Romeo's face and says, "Can I help you with something?" Romeo screws off. I eventually get up and walk away when the table gets busy. Then I glance at the banner above the table as I walk away. Beefy old guy was Lou Ferrigno. Dude, I absolutely love con stories like this. I remember another time when I was at San Diego Comic-Con, I was just looking at some random DC figures that were supposed to come out later that year. To my surprise, some dude stands right next to me looking at the same figures. So I kind of catch him out of the corner of my eye, and when I turn to look at him, it's one of the goats of comic book writing, Jeff Johns. My stupid face asks, "Are you Jeff Johns?" And with a smile, he responds, "Yup." I told him that he was a huge inspiration to my writing, and I got a pic. Dude was super cool, even if Snyder Bros would tell you otherwise. I was cosplaying a popular children's show character, Buster from Arthur. A mom tried flirting with me in front of her child after taking the photo. "What you doing later? Wanna grab a coffee?" But the worst thing I've seen? This guy fully walks up to this girl and cups her booba. He wanted to see if they were real. I don't get why there aren't more people getting punched in the face at these cons, because that's exactly what I would do if some random person came up and groped me. I've never been to a con, I'd love to go and cosplay, but I'm afraid of people doing stuff like that, especially after reading this thread of some of the stories. Those kind of things are rare. If you're curious about it, find a friend to go with you. Also, most cons have security and are very clear about harassment policies. They can and will kick out creeps if you report them. Went to a con as Zuko from Avatar. An Aang cosplayer approached me excitedly to talk about the show, but after 10 minutes, pulled out his phone and wanted me to read his X-rated Avatar fanfic. Proceeded to tell me how long he had been working on the fanfic and how he was planning out the rest of the story to have books like the show itself. This thing looked to be novel length by this point. I politely excused myself and left. But this guy later found me on Facebook and sends me NSFW Avatar fan art every now and then. Okay, this is a PSA for all spicy content enjoyers. Some of y'all really need to learn when and when not to talk about spicy content. Learn to read the room, as some would say. I love me some spicy content, but I'm definitely not talking to a person I just met about those interests. Come on, y'all. I had some small cake pieces with me for friends, carried it in an open plastic box in my hands. In the tram to the convention, I met an older lady. We started talking about my costume and what all these funny looking people were here for and so on. While I explained it to her, she was suddenly looking for something in her handbag, pulled out a small plastic spoon and helped herself to my cake while listening to me. I was too confused to say anything and let her finish. I even jumped out of the tram a station earlier because I was worried about more of the cake being eaten. It's a weird story, but looking back now, I should have offered her more. I don't know what it takes for you to eat a stranger's cake in a tram without asking first if you can have some. This is just bizarre. Makes me wonder what her life looks like. Maybe she eats from other plates and tables at restaurants too. Joey doesn't share food! Can I be the cringe? I cosplayed as Naruto when I was 13, and a Sasuke cosplayer who was 14 quote-unquote made out with me, which was basically biting my mouth. It went semi-viral on YouTube to the point where I was offered money. I had forgotten about that video until that email, and then decimated my whole YouTube account when I was 15 or 16. Good lord, I was a horrible weeb, and I have so many stories. A few years back, my then girlfriend was cosplaying Cell from Portal at a con. It was mostly great. Everyone and their mom wanted a photo with her. Except this one guy who decided to grill her on how much she really knew about Portal. He was looking at her like he had just found a unicorn. But she was pissed as hell that some stranger thought she needed to prove herself to him. I think he thought it was flirting. Guys, you really need to stop doing this to women. Actually, you just need to stop doing this to anyone. No one should have to prove their fandom to you. And if you are just trying to ask a question, keep it to 1, maybe 2 questions max. If they aren't asking you questions as well, they probably don't want to talk that much. I was cosplaying as Red X from Teen Titans, and I had this 16-year-old girl dressed up as Raven follow me around trying to give me a kiss all day. I was 20 at the time. And no, I didn't kiss her, by the way. I dressed up as Edward Elric. My friend was dressed as Envy from FMA. The show was still super popular back then, and glomping was a thing. Some girl ran up behind me at top speed and jumped on my back. And I'm tall, not short like Ed, and bashed me into a table and brought me to my knees. It was horribly embarrassing and painful. What's glomping? Sounds spicy. Glomping is essentially when someone runs at you full speed and jumps into your arms, or jumps on your back and clings on. Some people even do it without their target knowing it's going to happen, and you get the result of the OP here. It's usually posted around in generic rules listing at big conventions, no glomping, along with cosplay is not consent. There's this YouTuber with millions of followers that got famous for this said glomping. Or at least that's what it seems like. I personally can't stand this creator because I feel like this type of content enables other people to do it at cons. For all I know, they could be a cool person, but they do come off as extremely annoying in those videos. Also, if someone dove at me at full speed, you're getting a Kenny Omega knee to the face. More funny than cringy, but my husband doesn't really attend cons anymore because he feels he's too old for them. Before he stopped going, we attended Anime Central in 2002 in Chicago. We passed by a group of Harry Potter cosplayers wearing striped scarves, and my husband turned to me and said, "It's good to know the kids still like Doctor Who." Some girl asked me to sing a duet in the karaoke room, which I agreed to. 30 seconds in and I realized that it's some anime song that is sung in Japanese, and it's 8 minutes long. It was the longest and most cringiest 8 minutes of my life while butchering the Japanese language in front of an audience. Not really cosplay, but at the midnight showing of the last Harry Potter movie, I was dressed in a Slytherin t-shirt with my house scarf. I was standing with some friends and some girl came up to me and said that I was everything that was wrong with this world. I asked what she was talking about and she yelled, "Anyone who truly likes Slytherin is a bane on humanity." I just stared as her friends took her away. At Anime Matsuri last month, I was cross-playing as Prompto, with my friend as Noctis, a much younger Noctis cosplayer. They looked to be around 13 or 14, whereas we were in our mid-20s, came up to us and said that their Prompto really wanted to meet us. We followed this fellow cosplayer over to their group of friends, introduced ourselves to the other Prompto, and took some selfies and had some laughs. Apparently, the kids felt super comfortable around us because they then proceeded to pull out their sketchbooks and show us some explicit fan art they had drawn while loudly describing each spicy scene in detail. Needless to say, my friend and I exchanged a look of abject horror and hightailed it out of there, torn between feeling utterly skeevy and biting down the urge to call their mothers. Obviously, there are kids who wander into the not safe for work side of a fandom, but to have literal children showing me the stuff that they drew in real life was positively jarring. I cosplayed as Skull Kid last year. I don't know how it is at American Comic Cons, but in my country there is a lot of people with signs like free hugs, and sometimes they do it without asking. If this wasn't cringy already, since I 3D printed my mask, the pointy ends were, well, very pointy. When some weeb hugged me without asking, they usually got stabbed by the mask and laughed in an uncomfortable way and ended running off after the hug as soon as possible. I was dressed as Mermaid Man from SpongeBob, and I went up to a table to buy a poster, and this guy was like, "Hey, there's Barnacle Boy here." I said, "Where?" Because I saw no Barnacle Boy at the con yet. He said, "You." And everyone laughed because they didn't realize I wasn't Barnacle Boy and they thought I forgot what my costume was. Screw that guy, I was Mermaid Man. Went to a con with my girlfriend, who was dressed as Black Canary. I was Green Arrow. Naturally, some people asked of pictures of us or with us. Alright, cool, no big deal. What was weird was the number of guys that wanted a picture with just her. One guy even came up, asked if he could take a picture with us, and after we agreed, he handed me the camera. Oh, okay, I see what's happening here. But the cringiest moment was this one guy, maybe 20 years older than us. He asked for a picture of her. We were used to it at this point, so it's whatever. Then proceeds to spend about a good 60 seconds taking the photo. I don't know if he was taking multiple photos or if he was trying to get the perfect booba picture or what. But ain't no way it takes a full minute to take a single photo on a cell phone. Still, the day was super fun and hopefully we get the chance to go back in the future. Man, I wish I could say that cons don't have the creepy guys that take photos, but they are out there and they usually look like the mental picture of the creepy guy that you have in your head. I go to Dragon Con with my wife and like to take photos. Sometimes when I ask cosplay couples for a picture, the guy will usually say, "Did you want me or just her?" And I'm like, "Of course I want you, come on." I always feel bad for those dudes. Like, how many skeezy guys must be coming up and asking for pictures of just the girl? What a weird thing to do. See, I told you, some weird dudes with cameras at every con. I dressed up as Rose Quartz from Steven's universe, and a neckbeard type guy sort of dressed as a character from the same show approached me by coming up right behind me and said, "Rose, you're my waifu," while I was talking to a vendor. He had the greasiest hair I've ever seen and really bad BO. He asked for a picture and I said okay, and then he asked me to pose like I was kissing his cheek, and I said no. He got upset and said that I had to because he loved Rose, blah 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 blah, and I didn't know how to disengage. Funnily enough, a Pearl cosplayer intervened and told him to beat it. I've never seen Steven's universe, but if this is how all the characters act in the show, this is a pretty funny interaction. I dressed as Junkrat for a con, and at the time I had no idea how many kids played Overwatch. So for the entire day, all I got was 10-year-olds shouting references and wanting photos with me, and their parents giving me really strange looks. I cosplayed Frankenfurter from the Rocky Horror Picture Show at a Comic-Con about a year ago. I had a lot of pleasant interactions with other cosplayers during the day. Lots of, "Ooh, I love that movie," "Hey, do the time warp," sort of conversations. A few people hit on me. I'm a woman in fishnets and a corset at a Comic-Con. I was expecting that. Nothing too weird or uncomfortable. And then there was this one dude and his friend. They kept following me around, talking to me about weird personal topics and getting far too handsy. Eventually I started to get nervous, so I excused myself to the bathroom. I just wanted to distance myself from them a little bit. As I go to leave, the guy goes, "Wait! Before you go, can I get a picture?" Okay, fine, just take the photo and then leave me alone. So the guy grabs me, picks me up and throws me over his shoulder so my butt is sticking up in the air, in fishnets and bikini bottoms. And his buddy takes a photo. Then he drops me back on the ground and the two guys take off. It all happened in about 10 seconds, so I barely had time to react. Some guy dressed as Deadpool helped me up and walked me to the security booth to report the guys. But nothing came of it. So that was weird, cringy, and terrifying. I don't cosplay Frank anymore. Dude, I hate this and screw those guys. I hate how people have the ability to just ruin something for people by their actions that they make. Shout out to Deadpool for helping out the OP. Oh man, myself and a few friends occasionally go to cons just to hang out, drink, and buy some merch. But I'll never forget a local con in the early fall of 2008. We usually never go in cosplay, but Guru Login was still in a fever pitch of popularity at the time, and one of my friends was really big on it, and went dressed as Kamina while the rest of us went in regular clothes. It's worth noting that said particular friend is a decent looking 6'4" fellow and was training for a marathon at the time, so he pulled off a pretty damn Kamina. This turned into a day from nerd hell. From the moment we walked into the main hall, he was assaulted in nearly every manner by girl and guy alike. Tons of people wanted pictures with him or of him posing. Endless pictures, and countless times random girls, and a couple of guys, would run out of nowhere and jump onto him, which resulted more often than not, him nearly dragged to the ground by those random attackers. I can actually still remember to this day, one girl screaming, "Kamina-san, I love you!" as she flung herself at my friend. He did his damnedest to be nice and friendly for the pictures, while the rest of us spent more time acting as impromptu bodyguards for him than enjoying the convention. Needless to say, he doesn't care much to cosplay these days. I will say cosplay is fun, but you have to mentally prepare for it. I did a group X-Men cosplay one year, classic cartoon X-Men, and people loved it. We took a bunch of photos, but one thing that I wasn't prepared for was the people in my group wanting to shop and get free stuff. I was in cosplay, I wasn't at the con trying to hold anything other than my cosplay props. Needless to say, there was a little bit of tension in the group after group cosplay day. The only time I ever cosplayed, I cosplayed as one of the Love Live character school uniforms. Blazer, white dress shirt, really short skirt. Literally 5 minutes after showing up to the convention, I turned around on the escalator and caught the dude behind me trying to look up my skirt. Let me go ahead and share my own personal cringe story that actually involves me. Now, I often consider myself someone who can talk or have a conversation with anybody, but it's usually in a chill and comfortable setting. San Diego Comic-Con is neither of those things. It's hectic and crowded. This cringe interaction happened a few years ago. I was randomly walking by a booth and I saw this cosplayer that I follow on social media. She wasn't currently talking to anyone, so I figured why not try and start up a conversation. So I decided to ask her about cosplay, and at this moment she was wearing a green version of a Playboy bunny outfit, which is a pretty common thing at cons, but they're usually combined with a character. I tell her that I enjoyed her work and I was curious if she planned on doing any DC comic characters in the future because I haven't seen her do many. It's at this moment that I want to say she responded with a kind of sarcastic maybe, but that's when some dude wanted a picture with her, so I just said bye and left. I personally felt like the convo was a bit awkward, probably because during the whole conversation I was telling myself not to be the guy that overstays their welcome, which you see a lot at cons. So I just tried to make a quick conversation, which was bad. Anyways, I end up getting on social media later in the day and I see that she posted a photo of herself at the con. Turns out the Playboy bunny outfit that she was wearing was a version of Poison Ivy, a DC character. She even had a small little plant-like prop with her to show that she was Poison Ivy. I just completely face-palmed when I realized what I had asked her earlier in the day, and it made sense why her response felt kind of sarcastic. Definitely not my brightest moment.
People who have accidentally caused the death of another person. What happened? When I was around 4, I was inappropriately touched by my cousin who was babysitting me. I told on her, and she took her own life. I posted this before in more detail, but the truncated version is when I was 16 years old, I hit an 87-year-old man after he ran a stop sign. I was with him holding his hand when he died on the sidewalk. He had a heart attack. They weren't able to determine if he had the heart attack before the accident, which would explain why he blew through the stop sign, or if he had one as a result. His family was very gracious, and I am very grateful for them. His son called me the day after it happened, and told me his mom had died 6 months prior. His dad had been very depressed, and while they were sad he died this way, they were happy to think their parents were reunited. I was dating this girl that was a little dysfunctional due to having been a victim of CSA by her grandpa and nobody knew about it. I noticed some red flags and got her to open up and tell me about it. After we broke up, I told her mom she should stop inviting grandpa over to Thanksgiving dinners due to the SA. The mom called me a liar, but after asking the other daughters and cousins about it, they confirmed it was true and that they had all been inappropriately touched too. After word got back to grandma, she said, "I'll take care of it." Fast forward a week and grandpa is dead. Apparently grandpa had a lot of serious medications he was taking and grandma messed with the dosage which killed him. His death was ruled natural cause and nothing ever happened to grandma. It was my mother-in-law's birthday and her daughter and son-in-law had dinner for the event at their place. My wife, 3 kids, and I drove out after work. As we pulled up to their cul-de-sac home in the dark, I saw something odd in the grass between the sidewalk and street near their mailbox. When I got out, an old man, about 80 years old, called over to me asking if I wouldn't mind helping him up. Said he had been out for a walk, stumbled, and been in that spot for about 45 minutes. My wife and daughters went inside the house. My then 12-year-old son stayed with me while I helped the man up. Wonderful guy, started saying this was the icing on the cake for his day, as he had fallen asleep early afternoon on his couch with a lit cigarette, which caught the couch on fire. Fire department came, put the fire out with little damage, and moved the couch to the curb when they were done. By this time, my brother-in-law had come outside with us. We walked the man back to his house about 5 doors down. During our trip there, he regaled us with stories of him in the Navy during the war, and I'm ashamed to say I can't remember which war he had said. He made special not to talk to my son about how wonderful it was that he was helping. Introduced himself to us as Bill, said he was the last unpaid bill. Thought that was pretty clever. As we made to leave, he asked if we would bring his couch from the curb back up to the house for him. Not sure why he wanted it, didn't ask. So my brother-in-law and I moved the couch and set it next to the house outside of his garage. We wished Bill well, then headed back to the house for dinner. When I got in, I noticed that my shirt smelled of burnt plastic. Brother-in-law gave me a sweatshirt to change into, and we had a great birthday celebration before I and the family left about 2 hours later for home. Around 2:30 the next morning, our phone rang. My wife answered, and I pretended to be more asleep than I actually was so I didn't have to deal with the bad phone call in the wee early hours. They're very seldom about good things. It was the police department from the town my brother-in-law and sister-in-law lived in. They asked me questions about my activities the previous evening while I was at their house. The couch reignited and burned Bill's house down, killing him in the process. The police grilled my brother-in-law, examined his arms, then called me. I don't think I slept well for over a month afterwards and couldn't get the tragedy out of my head for a long time. I should have known from the smell on my clothes that it wasn't safe to move that couch. I should have put the pieces together, but I was just too interested in getting back to my family to celebrate. Nothing more ever came of it, but I'll never get rid of the knowledge that if I hadn't committed to one simple action that I performed, then another human being would not have died. I was relieved when my sister-in-law and brother-in-law moved a couple of years later because I hated seeing that empty lot every time I went to their house. This was maybe 11 years ago, but to this day, about once a year around my mother-in-law's birthday, my brother-in-law and I still have a toast to the last unpaid bill. Turned left into my sister's driveway at 3 a.m. A guy on a Harley was doing 60 miles per hour in a 30 with no headlight. My half-ton pickup left 4 feet of skid marks from being pushed back by the force. I still remember seeing him do mid-air somersaults. This was 1976. Dang, that guy was fully responsible for his own death. You just happened to be there. Lucky he didn't take you with him. It's a shame, but double the speed limit in the middle of the night with no lights? 100% his fault. War survivor from Chechnya 94 to 96 war. I told a girl, maybe 17 years old, to run out from the apartment building because I was so sure it was going to collapse. It didn't collapse, and she ran out into a hail of gunfire and died. I was so scared that I stayed in the building and it just never collapsed the entire time, so I left out the back. I often think about that. It was such a quick decision. She was right near the door. I was on my way out because the building felt like it was shaking, and I saw her and said, "Run out, the roof is gonna fall," and she ran out in a hurry and got blown apart by gunfire, shrieking in pain until she was hit again and presumably died. I wish I didn't tell her that, obviously. It still sort of haunts me to this day, especially her screaming. But I also know that I made the decision in goodwill, trying to save her life. And to be fair, the building really felt like it was going to collapse, and everyone was running out, not just me. Anybody would have told her to run as well. Nobody knew they were opening fire on the building. I know it sounds like lame justifications, but it is all I can think of to help ease my mind. Anybody would have done the same. I hope at least. I was supposed to meet a friend ahead to soccer practice, but he wasn't there when I got to where we were supposed to meet. I got impatient and decided to head to practice myself. He never got there, so I assumed he was sick or something. 2 days later, my mom told me he got hit by a car and died after running out in the street to get a ball he was kicking while waiting for me. The timing of things seems like if I had waited just a minute longer, he wouldn't have had to wait for me and would have lived. I was driving from a friend's house last November on a road I've driven a million times. I knew one area was particularly dark at night because the city hadn't replaced the streetlights in over a decade. The dark area also crests a hill in a residential area between 2 crosswalks that are far apart, so people cross the road at the top of this hill. Knowing all this, I still never saw him coming. There was a huge thud and my window was cracked all the way across. I turned around and saw him lying motionless on the sidewalk. It was late and no one else was there, so it was just me, parked on a side street, and this body. I checked his pulse while I was on the phone with 911, but couldn't feel anything because I was shaking so badly. This was maybe a quarter mile from the hospital, so the paramedics were there before I even realized what happened. They put him up on a stretcher with this strange device that I later found out was to automatically compress his chest. The cops showed up and I finally saw my car with the flashlight. There was a large chunk of flesh and blood caught on the side of my car. I passed my sobriety test and they took me home. He lived for 3 days before dying due to complications of the accident and was never conscious during that time. I found out through a friend of mine who's the editor at a local paper that the police were still considering charges. Also how I found out that he died. I was obviously a mess about the accident, but also the possibility of involuntary manslaughter. After the officer called me to tell me officially that he died, I consulted a lawyer and was basically told not to talk to the police again and to let them conduct their own investigation. 2 grueling weeks later, I got a phone call at midnight from the officer who gave me my sobriety test. He worked third shift. He told me that the guy was incredibly intoxicated and basically stepped into oncoming traffic without paying attention. With that info, I wasn't to be charged and I could go pick my car back up. The relief I felt was indescribable, but also terrible that I could feel so great in a situation where someone died. What made that feeling the worst was that the officer told me the family of the guy were super concerned with how I was doing and that they wanted to tell me they didn't blame me. He was 24 and had just graduated college. It was his last night in town before going back to his hometown. I go to his Facebook page every once in a while just so I don't forget what he looked like. I'm at least partially responsible for 3 deaths. So I'm a weather forecaster. A few years ago, I was forecasting for Afghanistan. Now, we were doing these forecasts from a base in the States, which means we had to coordinate our forecast with someone who was deployed to Afghanistan. Sometimes the downrange forecaster was really experienced, other times they weren't. It was a mixed bag. Anyway, I had been forecasting for at least 2 years before this incident. I was familiar with it, and I was actually in a supervisory capacity, simply overseeing all of the forecasts going out in my zone. Well, one day, I was talking with one of my forecasters about the potential for large hail and how I'd like him to put that in his forecast. Now that's a big thing to put in a forecast because of how operationally significant this is. Aircraft must be put in hangars, missions are canceled, assets must be protected, etc. So when it came time to discuss this with the downrange forecaster, he was absolutely against it. He didn't want to brief that to the commander because, again, missions have to be canceled based on what you think will happen. If you're wrong, you've set back a lot of people and wasted a lot of time. So the deployed forecaster tries to argue against it, but his reasoning really just boiled down to, I don't want to brief that. So when I wasn't looking, he essentially just pulled rank on my junior forecaster and forced him to take it out of the forecast. And so we went out to the base with no hail in it, only hinting at some vicinity thunderstorms. Well, when I noticed, I was furious, but I said screw it, we'll let him be wrong. This was the first time I'd ever wanted to put large hail in a forecast. Maybe we were over-forecasting it. Nope. Basically, right on schedule, a huge thunderstorm popped up and dumped large hail on the base. It did a few million in damage to aircraft, injured a helipilot who was pre-flighting his bird, and killed 3 Afghan National Army soldiers who had left on a patrol and couldn't find any cover. They wound up beaten to death by hail. That has always bugged me. They didn't need to die. We knew the potential was there, and I basically just let an incorrect forecast go out that got them killed. 3 lanes wide on my side of the street. I am in the lane closest to the middle of the street. I just get through an intersection and see a car attempting to turn in front of me into a gas station. This gas station entrance is close enough to the intersection I just went through that there is no middle section for them to wait in to turn when it is clear. They inch into my lane across a double yellow line and stop. I quickly get over to my right 1 lane. They inch over into the next lane and stop again. I start to panic. Why are they stopping? What is he doing? I quickly see I can get in the far right lane and move over. This older man driving, I think he panicked. He tries to gas it past me into the gas station. I'm in a Dodge Dakota and they're in an old Chevy truck with rack seating. I slow down as much as I can, but there is no time. I T-bone them and my car basically slams them into a concrete pole. I stop a couple of feet from a concrete wall myself. I get out of the car with my adrenaline on full. I'm not even sure if I'm hurt or not. I can't feel anything anyway. I stumble over to their car to see if they're okay. The looks I received from this old man and his wife still haunt me to this day. They looked at me like I was the Grim Reaper coming to claim them. Absolute horror. Blood coming down their face, wondering why I did this to them as smoke from the front of their car looms over them like creeping death. The woman died later that day from her injuries at the local hospital. The man later tried to sue me, but I was cleared of any legal wrongdoing based on the investigation that had taken place. They had concluded that I had done everything I could have done to avoid a collision. It was just unfortunate timing that this older gentleman made an illegal driving decision. A decision I am sure he regretted until the end of his days. I'm still messed up from this even though it was years and years ago. Getting cleared legally does nothing for one's own conscience and psyche. My vehicle, whether it was intentional or not, was used as an instrument of destruction that ended up killing a man's wife. I have PTSD flashbacks. If I drive by a similar looking area that looks similar to the accident site, I still get such crippling anxiety that I have to disassociate in order to not lose control. I have severe depression, and I don't know how I function and survive, to be perfectly honest. I've run the gamut of emotions over this incident. I have lost friends, relationships, and isolated from my family. Why? I don't feel I deserve what was taken away from others. I'm slowly killing myself daily over it because I can't find any meaning in it. That's because there is no meaning. It was an accident and I don't know how to accept it and move on. I've done different types of therapy. I've taken medication. I've talked to many people about it and nothing has changed. The reason I write all of this is to please implore all of you to be safe when you are behind the wheel of any motor vehicle. I did everything I could to be careful and something horrible still happened. I can't even imagine being the same level of reckless I have seen other drivers who end up getting away with it with absolutely no consequences. I hope with every ounce of my being that no one ever experiences the type of pain and suffering that has become my everyday life and reality. I wouldn't wish this pain, guilt, or suffering upon my worst enemy. I used to work a strange overnight schedule, 10-hour shifts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I try and keep awake the same hours on my days off, especially on Thursdays. This was a pretty rural area, so there wasn't much open at those hours except a gas station that had a tiny cafe area. I didn't want to keep people in the house awake, so I spent a lot of time at the gas station. I'd usually read or talk with the cashier on duty. I think she felt a little safer having someone else there too. One night, a man comes in with a little boy and asks if they can use the bathroom. It's something like 3 a.m. The kid looks sick or uncomfortable. To me, it looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. After they're in the bathroom, the cashier and I look at each other. She thinks there's something off about this too. I went outside to get a description of the vehicle. After they leave, we call the police. The local police passed it along to the county sheriff's department and a local officer came to the gas station. He asked us a couple more questions and we listened to his radio to hear what was happening. A county officer spots the truck and pulls it over. After the officer gets out of the car, the truck backs into it and takes off. The police pursue him. We didn't get a lot of details after that. He crashed or abandoned the truck. The truck was on fire and loose rounds of ammunition were going off in the truck. I believe the boy was somewhere safe because I didn't hear any more about him. The guy tried to swim across a small but deceptively treacherous river and he drowned. That was close to 20 years ago. If I remember correctly, he was the boy's dad but did not have custody. He was recently released from prison and the truck was stolen. At the time of the story, the man had been recently released from prison prior to stealing the truck and drowning. My wife and I were both very sick with the flu. My father watched our 2 small children and even came to sit with me in the hospital. The day after I got out of the hospital, he got the flu and died a couple days later. I still feel guilty knowing that he didn't have to sit with my children or that he didn't have to sit by my bedside, but he did. It helps knowing that he loved me so much that he was willing to put his life at risk to be with me. I just never imagined that the flu could have been so serious to be hospitalized, much less kill someone. I hold myself responsible and I feel guilty for getting him sick. When I was 18, I was working the night shift in a nursing home as an aide. Part of my job was to turn the paralyzed patients every 2 hours to make sure they didn't get bed sores. This one particular resident had late-stage Parkinson's disease, and her muscles and joints were stiff and brittle and she was catatonic. As I was flipping her from one side to another, I applied light pressure to her leg to move her back a bit and this snapped her femur. Given her age and health, the doctors decided that surgery was dangerous and she would have to heal on its own, if at all. Because of this, we could no longer flip her, which resulted in bed sores. She eventually went septic from those bed sores and died of septic shock. I always felt so bad about that. I haven't told many of my friends this story, but sharing it has helped wrap my head around what happened. It was about 3 a.m. on a Thursday last December. I lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time. I was heading back from a party at my friend's house pretty bleary-eyed. I had slept for a few hours and then got in my car. I was running out of gas, so I stopped at a gas station right off of I-95 before heading north to home. A guy walks up to me while I'm pumping gas and he asks for directions. He was older and a bit drunk. He came off as a yachty, and yachties aren't really common in that part of town. I had a bunch of yachty friends, so he didn't sketch me out, but I immediately kind of wrote him off. I told him to take I-95 north. He stumbles off and gets on his Vespa. Scooters are super common in South Florida, and then drives away. I go inside, get a drink, and then sit in my car for a few minutes, waking up before going. I hit the highway and I'm cruising north when I see a ton of emergency lights coming down the southbound side. I remember thinking, oh no, something's going down. I started paying closer attention to the road in front of me, and there were lights in my rear view too, coming up really freaking gassed. What happened next was kind of a blur and is not work safe. There were recognizable body parts in the road. Part of an arm, an upper torso with the head attached, blood everywhere, bits and pieces of plastic and metal in the road, and lumps of flesh or organ or something. I didn't see any of it until I was extremely close, but the image is something that has really messed me up. I called my mom. She said I was incoherent and screaming about blood. Florida Highway Patrol checked my car, which had blood on it but no damage, the next day, and the officer explained to me an older white male on a scooter had gotten on I-95 north. He merged inappropriately and was hit by a dump truck, and his corpse was hit by several other vehicles, including mine. They closed I-95 for the entire morning, well past rush hour. The news article said that remains and debris were strewn across an area the size of a football field. I sold my car and moved. The first 2 months were very rough, but I'm feeling better now, despite shaking at the moment. TLDR, I told a stranger to take the highway. He did so on a scooter. I drove through the aftermath of my advice. 7-ish a.m. on a Sunday morning. I'm heading to work in a small town at the age of 15 or 16. Come over a crest on a hill and have no time to react. T-bone someone making an illegal U-turn in a driveway. All I remember is veering off to the right and damaging someone's stone wall after the hit, crawling out of the wreckage out of breath and stumbling to see if the other person was okay. Their vehicle spun multiple times and landed in a ditch facing away, but driver's side visible from where I originally was. Driver wasn't there. Move along the vehicle and check the other side. Driver is hanging out of the passenger side window with a steady stream of blood from their skull. Bottom line for me is that I ask and implore everyone, please use your seatbelt. My mom is Thai and my dad is American, so I spend most of the year in the US and summers in Thailand. When I was 8, my family and my cousin's family were at the beach in Cha-am. My cousin's son, James, and I had been playing in the ocean for hours by this time, and we were both exhausted. Since we began playing, the water got much more violent with large waves as a thunderstorm was starting. As soon as my parents heard lightning, they yelled for us to come back to the shore, and I just started swimming back without checking to see if James was following. When I walked up onto the sand, I looked back and I couldn't see him. We were much farther out than 2 8-year-olds should have been, and James was too tired to keep himself above the water. I'm not sure what I could have done once I realized I couldn't find him, but I can't stop thinking about it. And when I go back to the condo there, I can't bring myself to get back into the ocean. Everyone responding has been incredibly supportive, and it means the world. I know realistically I couldn't change what happened, but that can't stop me from wishing I could. Thank you again to everyone for the kind words. 2 years ago, my sister was working at a dealership. Her husband and I were spending the day together until it was time to pick up sis from work. So when it came time to get his gal, I took the keys and said I'm driving. He was mad enough that he refused to go with me. When I came back with my sister, he was nowhere to be found, but it was common for him to go on walks to calm himself down, so we didn't think much of it. 8 a.m. the next morning, state police were banging on the door. They told us he was struck and killed by a train while he was sleeping on the tracks. That's not your fault. You didn't let somebody too drunk drive. That's what you're supposed to do. Was skiing with a friend when I was still living in Colorado. We were going a good speed and enjoying the mountain. When we came back onto the main trail, he was still going really fast. I yelled at him to slow down, and an elderly lady ended up merging at the same time as he looked back at me. My buddy is a good-sized guy and ended up colliding with this old woman. The ski patrol ended up grabbing her from the mountain, and she was clearly in a lot of pain. She ended up dying from her injuries a few days later. After her investigation, my buddy and the woman were both in the wrong. He had to pay some fines, but never got any sort of lawsuit.
Office workers. What's your best office story? Used to work with a fairly large woman. Every winter, she would catch a cold and hack and cough and just have a rough go of it. She would have these horrible coughing fits to the point where we thought she might pass out. One day, she had a horrible coughing fit and peed herself. That night, the carpet cleaners came in, pushed all of the office chairs into a back room, and shampooed the rugs. Everyone came in the next day to find their chairs in a room, and no one knew which chair was which. Everyone spent the day standing or sniffing their chair to see if they had the pee chair. The big lady was actually pretty dang nice, and she went on to lose a bunch of weight, ditch her loser husband, and have a great life. So there's a happy ending there. Came into work, I was the early manager, and before I get to my desk, my phone is ringing. Answer it, and it's an employee. All he says is, "I have to go. I'm bleeding from my butt." Stunned, I say, yeah, you should leave. I walk to his cube and find a blood-soaked chair with bloody napkins all over it. I ask if he wants to call 911 or something, and he says, "No, I'm driving myself." I call maintenance and I have to explain to them and upper management how all this blood appeared. Guy ended up okay and came back to work a couple of days later. Never asked what the heck the issue was. That's a bleeding hemorrhoid. Not that you really probably wanted to know. The chair was soaked. It was a lot of blood. I asked if everything was good after the fact, and he said it was, and nothing to worry about for other people. I speak from experience. Not quite that bad, but it lasted for days and bled clear through my pants and left a large stain on my seat at its worst. Went to the ER. The doctor acted like I was a big wimp and wasting his time. He then forces a golf ball-sized blood clot out of my butt. So pretty much not a big deal and nothing a person would ever want to discuss with another living soul. I work in a public library, which combines all the joy of customer service and office work. Usually it's just people calling to get phone numbers verified, but there's a few who call for life advice, including, "How many calories are in rye bread versus whole bread? Do I need to water my cactus today? I updated Firefox and now I don't like it. How do I go back to the old version? What day this weekend will traffic be bad?" Personal all-time favorite caller goes to the woman who called to ask me what fellatio technique geishas performed. I guess there is a tendency to automatically think that librarians must read a lot and therefore know more. As far as I know, that particular job is about storage and data entry, but this sure is a funny assumption. I work at a factory back office, watching over incoming and outgoing materials, and general material management. We had a shipping container come in from the States, transporting several big bags of sugar and milk powder mixture. We crack open the container, and much to our surprise, we find a cat. Bear in mind, this container spent a solid week or two at sea. The cat was alive. Apparently, it survived by eating the powder. So I did the old screenshot the desktop, hide desktop icons, and save the screenshot as the new desktop background. To 3 different computers, 2 of which were shared between 5 to 10 people. Now the problem was, I called in sick with food poisoning the next day. Utter chaos broke out. No one could open any programs. IT had to get involved, and it apparently took them a few hours to figure out what had happened. No one ever knew it was me, and I had planned on, taking the credit and winning that stage of the prank war. But no, I played dumb and bit my tongue. My current office building was once a funeral home that had sat vacant for a number of years after the previous owner shot himself in the apartment upstairs. When we first moved into the office, there was a wall panel that was accidentally knocked out in the basement. There were about 30 people worth of ashes hidden in the wall. I have one. We have an agent. Let's call him Joe. Joe is about 60 and the perfect employee. Never misses work, perfect stats, honest, customers love him and always give him praise. Volunteers for overtime and absolutely everybody loves him. I use his calls as examples in my training class. He's been offered numerous management positions, but he's perfectly content sitting at home, fixing customers' problems, making them happy, and making our company money. He is an absolute machine. 2 years ago, his wife and his 40th wedding anniversary was coming up, and I had a business trip to Ohio for a new system training. Joe was told that he had to come with me to learn. He pleaded that he couldn't because he would miss his wedding anniversary. Plus it was odd because agents never go on trips, and my manager said sternly, "Do it, Joe. You don't have a choice." Joe of course went home and packed up and got ready to leave a few days later. His wife said she was going to stay with her sisters while he was gone and left the night before. Our company car picked me up from the airport and we headed to Joe's. He was pretty upset and depressed but tried to be upbeat. We went to dinner and stalled for a few hours, for good reason, and when we got to the airport we boarded our plane and headed to Houston for a switch. We got to Houston and we walked up to the Miami gate and I said, "There's your plane." He looked up and I pointed over to his wife standing at the gate. My boss had arranged to send them to Miami for a week and then on a cruise to Jamaica for their anniversary with my boss's company credit card for expenses. The first thing out of his mouth was, "Oh my God, I didn't pack for that." But of course we had his wife take care of that when we sent her out on an earlier flight. He started crying right there in the airport and hugged me. I handed him the credit card and went over to his wife, gave her a hug and told her she owed me some apple cookies. So bomb. And headed to my plane for Ohio. Went to Ohio and... yeah, Ohio. We had a Phil Collins day to screw with a co-worker who professed to hating Genesis. Months after revealing their hatred, the president of the company had the IT company stay after everyone left to absolutely cover this person in Phil Collins's face, and I heart Phil signs in celebration of Phil Collins's birthday. It was practically a holiday and very little work was accomplished as a result. Pretty much the best day at the office ever. I love this because of everyone getting involved and because of my not-so-secret appreciation for Phil Collins. Sounds like a fun place to work. Will this be an annual event? I think my favorite part of this is the casual disregard for the IT department and the rest of the office, making them their own prank monkeys. A guy at my office had a fishing rod along the ceiling. He had the hook positioned over a man's head. We'll call the man Dave. Every so often he dropped the hook, which has a little weight, onto Dave's head and then quickly pulled the cord so the hook is back up to the ceiling and isn't visible. This is going on months and the guy who was being pranked didn't have a clue. He went to the doctor for tests because it felt like a throb to his head, so he worried something was really wrong. When we told him what was happening, he couldn't stop laughing at himself. Dave's revenge was pretty sweet. He did the deed with the prankster's sister. "Oh, I really thought there was something wrong with me. I guess you learn something new about yourself every day. You got me, guys. I'm going to penetrate your sister." OP thought the question said, "Best orifice story." I got this job a few years back. In the first week, I was blown away at the technical ineptitude of the whole darn place. Our job requires a lot of scanning, usually large stacks of bank statements, 100 to 200 pages at a time. And the people who I worked with and for, more often than not, needed to scan things that were front to back. How they did this blows my mind to this day. Step 1. Flip the whole stack upside down so the reverse side was ready to scan. Step 2. Make a copy of every back side. Step 3. Take the reverse side and place it just behind its front side so that it would be page 1, copy of page 2, page 3, copy of page 4, etc. Step 4. Scan the whole stack face up. The amount of paper they wasted was unbelievable. That's the day I became a genius by showing them our enterprise-level scanner could scan front and back simultaneously with the push of 2 buttons. This is also when I became partly responsible for every IT issue in the office, despite having IT members on staff at all times. 10 minutes into the company meeting, someone's phone went off playing bagpipe music. But as it got louder, we realized it was an actual set of bagpipes playing outside. Before we knew it, the guy marches into the conference room, blasting away that one Scottish song. I don't know what it's called, but you know the one I mean. After he finished playing, the speaker, who had been playing dumb until now, announced that we had just acquired a small company in Scotland. Best announcement ever. I worked with a guy we called Irish Jeff. We were on the sales team and he will call customers and start singing "Oh Danny Boy" until the phone rings. When the customer answers and asks if he was singing, he will say, "Well, I am Irish." He will then talk to them for 45 minutes about his Irish heritage and the names of the boats that originally brought people over from Ireland, without letting them off the phone. He doesn't really ever talk about anything he's supposed to be selling. He was born and raised in Texas. We call them plastic paddies in Ireland. They annoy us as much as they annoy you. This was at my last job, a call center on National Donut Day at Krispy Kreme. Girl A had gotten a box of donuts and was on a call with a customer. Girl B comes up and takes one out of the box. Girl A mutes her phone and says, "B-word, you had better be joking. Don't touch my donuts." Girl B turns around and walks away with the donut. Girl A hangs up on her customer and full-on assaults Girl B. An epic brawl breaks out right in the middle of the call floor, and they even crash through the giant partition that separates our call center from another company's, which is actually all in the same giant room. At some point, a knife tumbles out of one of their purses. No one actually pulled it out or tried to use it, but it did fall out. Management has everyone end their calls and clear the floors out. Cops are called and both girls are escorted out, never to be seen there again. Because donuts. I swear to God this is true. I worked in a staffing company as a recruiter. One of the sales guys always bragged about his martial arts skills. One afternoon, one of the female recruiters called bullcrap on him. They were right outside my cubicle. He says something to the effect of, "Oh, don't believe me? I will kick my foot right over your head right now. Stand here, just like this." He positions her and then he gets in a karate squat, I don't know how else to describe that pose, and goes for it without any stretching, practice, or anything. He rotates and kicks his foot way up, just high enough to make solid contact with her right temple with a solid thud. She staggers a bit dazed and he runs and hides in his cube. I couldn't believe what I just saw. It happened so quick. It was insane. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if the individual is Michael Scott for the audacity and irresponsibility or Dwight Schrute for the martial arts. Maybe some kind of freak hybrid. We call her the Runner. Call center rep was going to be fired for refunding fees that had never been charged. She was essentially just giving away money because she couldn't figure anything out. About halfway to the conference room, she figures out what's happening. As such, she comes to a dead stop and refuses to keep going. She keeps asking her manager, "Johnny, are you going to fire me?" Of course he can't confirm since he's still in the middle of the floor, so he tells her he just wants to be able to have a conversation in private. She keeps asking and he keeps not answering. Eventually, she just turns around and takes off for her desk. Johnny is standing there for about 10 minutes trying to decide between going after her or continuing to the conference room where his boss is waiting for them. He finally decides on the conference room. Johnny is a pretty large guy and his boss is a chain smoker. After the boss knows what happened, they take off running over to her desk and the other rep tells them that she left. They then sprint down into the parking lot. Just as they get to the doors, they see her car pulling onto the street. They hung out for about 5 minutes to catch their breath. When they got back, Johnny called corporate HR, and they let him know that the rep had already called Aetna to file for a leave of absence. She got fired anyway. A girl I worked with, married, was screwing the boss, also married. They stayed after hours for weeks to do their thing in his office. For some reason, she opened up to me about this, even though we weren't friends, and she included the fact that he prematurely arrives all the time. So anytime he's being a butthole, I just picture that and I feel better. This morning, I found a bloody glove in my desk drawer, and Jim Halpert tried to convince me I committed murder. I think he may be the real murderer. My coworker was out of town for an office pancake breakfast. In her absence, we decided to make her a breakfast plate. We ended up making a Vitruvian man made of sausages on a Royal Chenet plate and hiding it in her office. She found it, and then the Vitruvian man began to travel office to office. It was sealed with tape, but that didn't stop it from starting to go moldy. The Vitruvian man was hidden in desk drawers, under paper piles, behind coats. I knew it was my turn for the Vitruvian man to end up on my office, but when I got in, I couldn't find it anywhere. Later in the day, one of our VPs came in to meet me with a serious matter. He asks me a question, and I'm thinking of my response. I look up. There on the ceiling, Mission Impossible style, is a moldy man made of sausages with its taped-on smiley face looking down at me. I awkwardly carried on the conversation with the VP through random laughter which didn't make sense to him. I had to throw out the plate after that. In total, we had it moving around the office for about a month. We've had a couple of good prank wars over the years. Best thing that comes to mind quickly is when we changed a guy's phone autocorrect to replace the full stop with a question mark. He was very confused for days. I also tied all the cables of a guy's computer together under his desk with a zap strap. Monitors, mouse, keyboard, phone, etc. I then hooked that bundle of cables to the lever under his chair that controlled the up-down position and turned the chair so that it was at its 90-degree angle. He came to his desk after lunch and sat down, grabbed a hold of his desk like he normally does to turn his chair, and spun to face his computer. The entire desk was pulled into the rear corner of his cubicle. It made a lot of noise, but not as much as he did swearing. I changed the guy's autocorrect to change the to the fricking. He could not type, so he was always looking down at his keys and depending on words to catch any mistakes. Needless to say, he turned in documentation like, I called the fricking customer and they told me that the fricking software was not functioning correctly. Clearly, I've switched the word fricking for the actual word that this particular prankster used. Here are some more office pranks. I changed people's autocorrect to say, I'm pooping instead of hey. Another one, change work to the brothel. And the best, change beer to fun butt stuff. I'm pooping. Super busy day at the brothel today. In desperate need of fun butt stuff. I did this to my business partner's computer as a joke and went on holiday. He never proofreads anything, so when I got back, I walked into a massive crap storm. He still thinks his computer caught a virus, and if he ever finds out the truth, he will murder-suicide us both. 10 out of 10. Totally worth it. The only funny thing was the time I placed an ad in the paper saying, monkeys for sale, $50 with his number. That's a whole nother story. You'd be surprised at how many people want cheap monkeys. There are many phantom crapper stories out there where someone drops a deuce in the bathroom floor or shower. But at one of my Navy commands, we actually had someone take a crap in the coffee pot, and then run the coffee machine, fill up the pot, and leave it there for people. Luckily, someone smelled it before they tried to drink it. They never caught the guy. We had a general office questionnaire one day. Questions like, do you like your job? Do you feel listened to? Or have you been harassed at work? One person filed in yes to that last question. Massive panic within the company followed. Protocols were set up, meetings held, experts hired, and our team managers took each and every one of us separately and asked us with concern and kindness in their eyes, was it you? Did anyone hurt you? It was John. He and Fred were good friends, and always slapping each other on the butt or poking each other in the side, especially when on the phone and with a customer. He had filled in yes for a laugh because technically he was slapped on the butt. He got to explain that to the company president and was sacked shortly after. I think it's more screwed up to do an anonymous questionnaire and then ask people what they answered. Really poor ethics. Good luck to the management if they ever try to get straight answers on future surveys. They don't want straight answers, they want a paper that says everything is perfect. If doing crap like that means that people will lie next time, rather than mention any actual concerns, then that's all the better for them. Two middle-aged women, late 40s, grey hair, mom jeans, got into a fight at the office. I won't use their real names. I don't remember the context of the fight, but Deb went into Stephanie's office and closed the door, and there was a little bit of shouting and then a thud. The door flies open just in time for me to see Stephanie throwing a punch. They yell at each other in the lobby, and one of them actually says, "Let's take this outside." So they do. Some of the younger guys in the office went after them and had to break them up in the parking lot. Only one of them got fired, and they offered me her job a few days later. So I had this coworker who got a hold of the office's emergency air horn. She would sneak up behind people and blast it right in their ear. Most had a heart attack. She was really good at being sneaky with it too, and you'd be working away, have no idea, and she'd be like right under your fricking desk, and then that gosh darn air horn. Were there not huge consequences for blowing the emergency air horn to prank people? On the one hand, this is hilarious. On the other hand, I would absolutely not tolerate it in my workspace. I think the tension of not knowing where the next toot was coming from would destroy my sanity. Our office was centrally controlled by a head office in another city. There was a massive transformer explosion knocking out all the systems and controls in the head office. Essentially, no work could get done, no customers could get to us, we couldn't even cool the building down. Mid-August was 35+ degrees Celsius outside. So we had to send everyone home for about 3 days, and only essential staff stayed. I was in HR, so I was one of them. Slowly started to build up staff as we were getting closer to operation. Ended up working about 110 hours, including sleeping there. Working, however, is a very loose term. Since no PCs could run anything, we sat and watched TV, played board games and poker, played a ping pong tournament, and in our break room we had NES, SNES, and Sega. We ended up playing Super Spike Volleyball Tournament, an NES Ice Hockey Tournament, which I won, and an Excite Bike Tournament. One of the guys who had to stay on through the night played through Zelda. In conclusion, Explosion got me 70 hours of overtime while winning NES ice hockey tournament with all the skinny players. Oh boy, do I have a good one. I was an intern at the time. Summer of 2013, I'm interning at a pharmaceutical/biotech company and was meeting the team. There was this particular guy, white guy, mid-40s, on the team who I had lunch with on a daily basis. We talked about what I was studying in school at the time and how I wanted to travel the world for a bit after graduation instead of just going straight to a 9-to-5 office life. He got deeply depressed when I said so and started saying he's been doing this 9-to-5 thing for 20 years. He's like 45. And what I said to him really made him wake up. I'm in my head like, oh, this isn't going to be good. Fast forward 2 days later, I'm finishing up training modules assigned to me, and all of a sudden, one of the HR ladies walks over to the manager's cube and explains that he quit. No 2 weeks' notice. And my manager bolts up and yells in disbelief, "He what? Please repeat what you just said. He went to Taiwan to find himself?" I'm trying to connect the dots to see if I, the lowly intern, had really said some things to stir up an employee to quit his job and travel the world. I didn't tell my manager the conversation I'd had with him, but I did tell one of the girls that I worked with, and that's when I started my journey of an office fling. But that's a story for another day. In conclusion, I had a casual conversation as an intern with an employee about my aspirations to travel the world after I graduate. Probably made the employee quit, don't know if it was coincidence or not, but I think the conversation stirred his actions.
Cashiers, what's been the most interesting reaction you've experienced when someone's gotten their card declined? Not necessarily a bad customer behavior story, but one that I'll share anyway. I was a cashier at a chain hardware store, the big orange one. A mom, dad, and a few kids, all in ill-fitting clothes, but pleasant as all get out, come up to the register and look like they're having a rough day. They have 3 carts full of merchandise, all basic stuff. One of everything you would need if you were moving out or starting from scratch. Toilet paper, cleaning supplies, mop, broom, light bulbs, carts full of just everything you can imagine. I ask, "You guys moving to a new place?" The mother says, "Actually, our house burned down." I apologize for their circumstances and continue to ring up their items. The total ends up over $1,000. I run their card and it's declined. At this particular department store, you're allowed to discount a total up to $50 without manager approval. So I do that and it's still declined. The parents look like they're at their complete breaking point but are taking it so gracefully for a family with 3 kids who just lost everything. The mom tears up and starts calmly making decisions about what to put back. I asked them to hang tight, pulled the manager aside and explained the situation. The manager and I walked back to the family and they are still eliminating things. And my manager took 50% of the entire transaction, then added a 10% senior discount and a 10% military discount on top of everything. The card then worked and they were incredibly grateful and nearly in tears as I bagged everything up. I'll never forget how awesome that manager was. I didn't even really have to explain anything after I said, "So their house burnt down?" And she immediately jumped into action to show some compassion. A good old story about human kindness and compassion. Well, ain't that just peachy now? I was working at a mega bookstore. A man came up with 2 or 3 serious philosophy books. Then he flicked his credit card at me. Don't do that to a cashier, just don't. I said nothing and swiped his card. It declined. The screen asked me to call Amex. I tell the customer I have to call. He hisses at me not to say it so loud. I had a phone with me, so I made the call right there standing at the register. Amex tells me to confiscate the card, if you believe you can do that. So I say, sorry, they tell me I have to take your card. He screams, "My mother is a crunt minus the R. She cut me off." I cut the card in half. I still feel good about that day. Literally cannot stand that attitude. This person sounded like they were just a little jerk, so I don't blame their mum for cutting them off. The fact of the matter is, people, your parents may have brought you into this world, but that doesn't mean they have to be responsible for you forever. I've talked about it before, but personal responsibility is just something that you have to accept eventually when it comes to living your life and being responsible for yourself and the way that you behave and treat other people. We see a fairly clever smoke and mirrors routine at my liquor store. Customer comes in, walks to the spirits hard liquor section and puts 1 bottle under their shirt while packing up a second and walking back to the register with it. They attempt to buy the second bottle with a card that they know will decline. Then they say they have to call their bank and dial a number as they leave. Misdirection works. These goddamn alcoholic criminals can learn misdirection and deception, but they can't learn the 12 steps. Cashier at a drive-thru. I took his card at the first window, told him it was declined. He says, "All right, I'll just go, I guess." He pulls up to the next window, demands his food, then slams on the gas, pulling away, almost crashing into another car. That boy wanted his Wendy's. If you are ever hungry enough to steal, get fruits and vegetables and things. I remember I was in America fairly recently in LA, and I met this homeless guy. At least I assume he was homeless because he was pretty dirty and preaching the word of God. Anyway, I decided to buy this guy some food at like a bodega or something. He's picking out cereal packets and everything. And I say to him, "Oi, take a banana." And he's like, "What? No, I don't want a banana." I'm like, "Take a goddamn banana. It's full of potassium. It's good for you." Like, seriously, if you're gonna steal food, get something that is wholesale good for you, not goddamn Wendy's or McDonald's or something like that, I swear. I had this one lady who just kept making me rescan it over and over and over again until eventually my manager had to shoo her away. She was clearly desperate, but I worked at a store where nothing we sold was necessary for daily life. Literally nothing, so I didn't have much sympathy. Liquor store? No, we had like ugly fake plants and furniture and random decorative things. I'd be sympathetic for alcohol. That was multiple comments on the same thing, but I felt like it was necessary for the context, and yeah, I wouldn't be that sympathetic about that either. I was at a fairly uncrowded Walmart in a nice neighborhood at about 11 p.m. and my card didn't get declined, but there was something strangely wrong with it. It was the only form of payment I had. The cashier kept trying to punch in numbers and doing all sorts of computer stuff, and he needed to see my driver's license for some reason. It was taking forever, and I became overwhelmed with paranoia that it was a Jason Bourne type situation, that I swiped my card and an alert came up on the screen with a big red X and a code that meant he needed to stall as long as possible until men in suits could surround the building and I could be apprehended. I was sweating bullets and thought about running, but then it finally went through and I could take my milk and Reese's home. My man out here buying some Reese's Pieces and he thinks he's gonna get Jason Bourne. My God, buddy, I need to tell you something. It's okay, but you are not the one. Mostly it's just, oh no, that should definitely go through. Try it again. Fails. Let me check the bank. Calls and moans at the bank for a bit. Now try. Works. Now that I think about it, my card has never been definitively declined. I've had times where the tap doesn't work, or it's like, you're suddenly spending a lot of money. Is this actually you doing this? Yes, it is. Okay, and then it works again. I had one lady who screamed and accused me of purposely making her card decline to embarrass her, as if a 16-year-old making minimum wage somehow could manage that or would have any reason to do that to a stranger. I don't doubt that, but teenagers can be excessively cruel. Back in the 90s, I worked for Rumblos. Had a guy pick out a new TV and VCR, wanted warranty. Nice easy sale. Trouble is, I noticed the signatures were a bit different, and in those days, anything over £100 you had to phone through for authorization. So I did, and the card was stolen. Lady at the other end of the phone said I was as much as possible supposed to hold the line and keep the customer in the store as the police had been called. So I say to the guy, "Sorry, it seems their system is playing up, so it's going to take a while for the authorization to come through." He seems fine with it. Waited and waited what must have been 20 minutes, and another customer said, "You know what, mate? You're making it look like he's stolen that card." I told him that I was just told to wait for the authorization code and that would take a while, because their system, yada yada yada. Card bearer pegged it out of the shop. I could now explain to the Good Samaritan that the card was stolen and in the nicest way possible that he was a butt and he should keep his thoughts to himself. Got paid £50 for the card, handed it to the police who turned up about 5 minutes after he'd bailed, told them what he was wearing, but he was long gone. Wow, both those men were tosses in the end. Several years ago, the day after Christmas at Target, a woman has 3 carts full of marked down Christmas merchandise. My scanner was broken, so I had to hand type each UPS code in by hand. Needless to say, it took a while. The customer snottily complains about how much I was inconveniencing her by taking so long. Finally finished ringing up her purchases, and she hands me a card. Declined. She had me run it again. Declined. Again. Sighing outrageously, she pulls out her wallet and flips it open. I swear the woman had like 20 credit cards. She starts wiggling her fingers over them like she's picking a tarot card. Hands a new card to me. Declined. Another card. Declined. Has me try several cards more. All declined. Finally, super frustrated, she writes me a check. In mounting glee, I tell her it's declined also. She slams her front card away and stomps out the exit. Lady behind her asks if her items are up for grabs. I say, "Yep," and proceed to watch as a horde of people ravage the contents of the carts. It was awesome, like watching sharks eat chum. I still think people are generally better off without credit cards because some people just can't be trusted. I had a customer that was yelling in multiple languages in my lobby demanding a refund onto his gift card. We had already made his drinks, but he said it took too long. Smoothie shop, midsummer. It's going to take a bit as always. The guy wouldn't stop yelling, was trying to take other customers' smoothies to replace his, even though his were in his hands, all good. After trying to convince him that I absolutely cannot give him a refund on the gift card without the actual gift card and number, he finally walked up to the register, deliberately knocking over 2 stanchions with the guided rope between them, then proceeded to flick the 2 gift cards at me, both missing and going over my shoulder. The craziest part is in the end, he actually didn't pay on the gift cards. He paid in cash, wanted the smoothie's refunds put on these non-reloadable gift cards, but also to keep the smoothie. At that point, I went to hand him back the cards. He dropped his smoothie, one was mostly gone, and kept the other, and just walked out the door, leaving $50 in gift cards. Utterly astounding interaction. Yes, I agree. What an ignoramus. I had a lady break down and start crying. While she was in the line, she already looked like her world was falling apart. I don't remember what it was she brought, but I don't think it was more than $30, and the guy behind her offered to pay for it. More crying ensued. You know, I'm sure most people would feel sympathetic to this crying woman, but I bet there's someone out there, a Squidward of a human being, who's just like, okay, lady, let's keep the line moving. We've already established you can't afford it. Go on, leave. That'd be awful. But even then, as cruel as that might seem, it's not even the wrong response to have to it. I was moving from Tennessee back home to Ohio. I had my entire life in my car and it got towed in the college town I made a stop in to have lunch with a friend. I had $100 to get home, costing me $120 to get my car out. My friend covered the $20, but I only had a half a tank of gas to get home. Was counting change at the gas station I stopped at. Needed about $10 to get home, I believe, and started crying and having a panic attack. Went to the bathroom and came back. The cashier told me the guys behind me filled up my tank and to have a safe trip home. More crying, and it was just a really good feeling to know there are decent human beings in the world. Well, if I had an interaction that sweet on my travels back home, I'd be singing all the goddamn way. Just the other day, I had a lady whose card got declined. Her response was to try it about 6 more times, then it hit her. She forgot to take her card out of her pocket, and long story short, she managed to demagnetize her card. Her solution was to run home and grab cash, which wouldn't have been a big deal, except she ran her food stamp card first, and the register physically will not let me do anything except finish tendering. So I had to cash her out, return the non-food items, hold them until she got back, and re-ring them. And yes, she spent a good 5 minutes ranting about how I was conspiring against her until she figured out what had happened. Because a lot of people are asking, I couldn't key in her card number manually because I have to have the card in my hand to do it, and the customer refused to give it to me. All the while, this woman is accusing this person. She's picturing that if she accuses them enough, he's going to turn around and go, "Kuna Dioda!" On the receiving end, I was working in construction pretty far from home, and for lunch I went to get an $8 custom sandwich from a fancy grocery store. At the register, my card got declined, and when it did, I immediately checked my phone and saw I had a 0 balance. I told the lady, sorry, I can't pay for this, and she said, wait, hold on, and called a few people over, and she ended up paying it for me. I still remember her face. I tried to pay her back after my next payday, but she said, no, I don't want it. I like to help, and I imagine no other people will do the same. I will never forget her. She turned what would have been a depressing day into something I will never forget. I was told to be quiet and polite when explaining that a card wasn't working, so when the transaction was declined, I tried to keep my voice down. Older gentleman with family asked me to speak up. He still couldn't hear me. His family laughed and said something like, you daft bugger, the card's been declined. He laughed and said he used the wrong card. Fortunately, the other one worked. At least it was a positive reaction. Uneventful. All I have to say is, English? I don't know how it is now, but 20 plus years ago when I worked as a cashier, if we called in for a manual verify, the only thing we ever said was a code X decline. We were never told what the codes meant, but apparently one of them was a tip-off to the verifying team to send the police. I found that out when I had one that was taking an extremely long time to go through, kept asking all sorts of stuff like confirming our address and systemic delays. When the popo showed up, I knew what was going on. Phoning in for authorization was handy. In the 90s, I had a couple young guys come into our music store. My aunt says I can buy a DJ setup as a graduation present. He proceeds to show me this handwritten note on a napkin. I allow my nephew to buy a DJ setup as a graduation present. Naturally, he starts picking out the best of everything. Or when there were two great items, each with a slightly different advantage, he took both. The buddy had some stuff thrown in for himself as well. Full PA system, stands, cables, mics, the controller, the pile gets deep. So I run the card card in the imprinter, make the call, actually to the police, while an employee distracts him with information on certain pieces. I hung up and told him for the high amount they had to call me back with the authorization number. It is typical, should be 5 minutes. Cops showed up, the kids turned white, they get escorted outside. Turns out they were out swimming at a local beach and stole the credit card from a lady's purse. I'm just gonna say, screw them kids. Like, it's one thing to steal physical money from someone, but to attempt to accrue massive credit card debt on someone else's card, that's just scummy. I know that the banks usually reimburse you if you get found being a victim of fraud, but they deserve a swift kick in the nether regions. I was 16 years old, working for minimum wage at the Jesus Chicken restaurant. A guy and his daughter came in and she was in a gymnastics uniform. They order and she starts telling me all excited about how every time she has an out-of-town competition, they try the local chicken chain together. Their total was only $16, but his card got declined. He pulled out a second, but it declined too. She looks disappointed and he tells me to cancel the order. But it was only $16, so I run to the back and grab my own card and run it through. They get their food and he lingers behind to thank me and tells me that he's going through a divorce and they probably wouldn't have gotten to continue their tradition if I hadn't stepped in. I felt good doing that for someone without expecting anything in return, but to my surprise, right at closing that night, my manager comes to the back and says someone is asking for me. The guy came back and gave me $30 and thanked me for making his daughter's day. Since a lot of people seem to have questions about the money and/or validity of this event, I'd like to address them. My card was a debit, not credit. Don't know why that matters. When the guy came back at closing to give me the money, he had plenty of cash on him. My guess is he had it back at his hotel. He thanked me for making his daughter's day because he'd been going through a rough divorce and his soon-to-be ex had most likely cancelled his cards and had been pulling stunts like that a lot, hence the backup stash of cash. I paid for the food instead of having them come back because my parents had been talking about paying things forward in our family and I wanted to do something nice for someone besides it was only $16. Jesus Chicken is Chick-fil-A. Yeah, I admittedly just wanted to know if Jesus Chicken was a real place, so I'm glad they answered that. I'm disappointed though. Not me, but an elderly lady in front of me at a Walgreens. She had mostly food items when her card declined. She was gracious and simply pulled a couple items aside. It went through, but I saw that the items were nuts and jerky. You know, protein sources. And I started imagining her being on a fixed income and being malnourished, so I paid for them myself and then found her in the parking lot and said, "Ma'am, excuse me, but I think you left this behind," and handed her the bag. I walked away quickly before she could say anything. I have another story about how I bought a guy a Slurpee at a 7-Eleven because his card declined for something that literally costs a couple bucks and my heart broke for him. I figure this is my neighborhood, these are my neighbors. I know what it's like to be broke as all get out. If I can spare a couple of dollars, then why not? Ooh, you big softy. I bought a girl that was crying a ticket to a big music festival after hearing her out. She'd been conned and lost €300. It would have been her 5th time and all her friends were already inside, but her ticket was declined. I still remembered the times that I needed to plan stuff like that in advance and save up. So I told her to hold on, made a few calls and told her to hang on, and tell me a bit about what she was looking forward to keep her from stressing out, telling her over and over that it was going to be okay. 15 minutes later, I got a call and a text with a scannable ticket. Walked in with her, brought her €100 worth of coupons, gave her a hug, and left. Now, my country is pretty small, but this was 300 kilometers away from home. I just felt like doing something nice and didn't want her to think that there was anything more to it. Almost 5 months later, she ended up finding me at my store. We talked, I thought she was cute, nothing more happened for another 6 months. A week before the festival, she showed up again. She'd moved to a city a few kilometers away from me for uni, so we lived within minutes of each other now. Went to the festival together and had fun. I fell for her badly. Asked for her to go on a date with me while we were both high, ended up taking her to the fanciest restaurant at the festival. Had amazing food. Got pretty drunk later, and that's how I met my girlfriend. Definitely better than most stories, and it's not the first time being nice has paid off, but it's not why I help others. It's only 9 days until the festival, and I want to tell this story to someone. I might ask her to marry me. I'm a wreck right now. Haven't slept in 2 days. Just needed to tell someone. Sorry if it bothered you. I don't know why your story would bother anyone unless they're a petty, jealous, loveless little goblin man. My only thought is, while I am fairly generous, I would never spend that much money on a stranger. This happened to me and I was mortified. In my defense, it wasn't declined due to lack of funds or available credit. I went to Nordstrom's or Macy's to pick up a few items for a holiday. eBay. I think the item in question was a purse for my mom. It wasn't expensive, but it wasn't cheap either, like $250 to $300. I had placed the order online for pickup in store. Walk in, talk to the lady, get item, and go to the register. We tried to run my card, bam, declined. What? She runs it a few more times and still declined. I'm confused and a little embarrassed at this point. I call my bank, Wells Fargo, and ask them what is going on and why can't they push through the charge. They claimed the one I had expired. I read the expiration back to them and told them it was perfectly fine. It wasn't until later that the real story came out. Apparently, they detected fraud somewhere in my account, but no actual charge fraud, and decided to cancel my card and issue a new one. They did so without notifying me. They also said since it was a fraud hold, they couldn't push this transaction through, not even a one-time exception. I had to sullenly tell the teller that I would be back tomorrow. It was close to closing time for them. She gave me this look like I wasn't going to be back. That probably hurt the most. I went back the next day and bought the crap out of that purse. You go, girl. You buy that purse. You live your best life. You show that judgy teller. Not declined, but a card machine not working at Subway. Just happened a week ago. Walked into Subway, they had a big sign on the door, cash only, card machine malfunction. I, of course, didn't notice as I was on my phone. Ordered my sub and had an issue as I had no cash. So I went to the ATM down the street, got money, and ate my sub, no issue. Another guy walks in and the same thing happens to him. He also decides to go to the ATM down the street, only his card gets declined. He says it's because he was out of state and his bank wouldn't allow it. So he comes back to tell the lady, and she's really sorry. He gets really angry and walks out the door yelling, "Next time make the sign a little bigger so I don't waste all my effing time. Thanks a lot." I'm sure some people have had worse reactions to things like that, but I couldn't help but laugh. Yes, the sign could have been a little bit bigger, but when I walked back in after going to the ATM, I realized the sign was pretty damn decently sized. Could the cashier have asked each customer beforehand? Yeah, she started doing that after this guy was a butthole, but really, is it her fault that he wasn't paying attention? Luckily, I never come across this issue because I insist upon carrying at least a bit of cash around on me. And establishments that decide that they only take debit and credit card are frickin' moronic.
What went away because of smartphones? Portable MP3 players. I used to work in a warehouse and we weren't allowed to have our cell phones with us. Well, no devices with any cameras on them. We were allowed to listen to music and have one headphone in one ear. Everyone who worked there had a cheap MP3 player for that reason. It's more niche now, but there's definitely still a market for those. Audiophiles also love to have separate devices for several reasons. While iPhones are slightly better about it, Android is actually awful about playing high-quality sound files, and streaming services chew through data if you want hi-fi sound. But a dedicated music player, especially if you splurge and get something like a FiO with the DAC in it, that's the good stuff. Even refurbished iPods have a decently sized market these days, although that's partially due to collectors too. Man, as I get older, I'm kind of happy that I got to experience the different eras of music, from Walkmans, aka CD players, to MP3 players, to now smartphones. To be honest, I love music, but I never really thought about how smartphones could affect the quality. I always thought it was more about the headphones you use to listen to the music. But hey, the more you know. Payphones. One day I was walking my daughter, who was 5 at the time. We came across an old payphone and she asked me what it was. I explained to her and she started laughing and said, "Mommy, they don't just put phones out in the park." It does sound absurd, but we did put them out in parks and plenty of other places. I think the last time I saw one was right outside of the local library. They were the last people to get rid of theirs. The ability to memorize phone numbers. I don't know my spouse's phone number, but I still remember the phone number of my best friend from the 1st grade. Totally had this conversation with my client today. I work with these teens. Turns out many of them don't save numbers in their phones, but end up learning the numbers and who the people are. Their reasoning? If for some reason something happens and they don't have their phone, they at least have the people's numbers by memory. Growing up in the late 70s and early 80s, my stepdad was involved in a lot of politics and labor union stuff. Dude knew pretty much everyone involved with that, in our city of about 500,000. And as far as I could tell, he had most of their phone numbers memorized. You could ask him random names, he'd sit there, think for a few seconds, and rattle off a phone number. This was when you didn't have to memorize an area code, so you just needed 7 digits, but still, it was pretty impressive. It's crazy how much you can remember if you actually train your brain to do so. I used to work retail, and at the time, I could have told you the number to any piece of produce if you needed to ring it up at the register. I also had about 90% of the store memorized, so I could tell you exactly where you needed to go to get something. It's all about repetition. Road maps, calculators, camcorders, privacy. The best part of every road trip when I was younger was when my sister was holding the map and then it got sucked out the window within the first 2 hours of the trip. Every damn time. Standalone GPS units for cars are fairly non-existent now. Yeah, but they seem to be huge for semi-truck drivers. You can go into most truck stops and they're still selling them from behind the glass for a few $100s to over $1,000. It's crazy. They let you put in height, weight, length, and even if you're hazmat. It's not like a TomTom. It has really everything you need to go anywhere in the country. I've never lost service with the standalone GPS. And if you're a local guy like me, you still need to figure out what signs you can ignore and what signs mean you're gonna screw up your whole damn life. It's worth $1,000 all day. The house phone with the cord that you can twirl up while you were talking. And later the cordless phone that you could never find until it rang. I always knew where the cordless phone was and was reluctant to get rid of them simply because they were useful for calling my lost smartphone. Radio Shack and other stores where you would buy cameras, stereos, and recorders. This could be a consequence of internet shops rather than mobile smartphones. Dodgy UFO sightings and the Loch Ness Monster. Don't forget Bigfoot! Phone books, notepads, cameras for everyday people. Maps, atlases, the list goes on. Well, paper notebooks are actually still having record sales. My wife is a list person and she has notebooks all over the place. Using a dictionary to find meanings of words. When I was a kid, my mom would tell me that if I didn't know how to spell a word, then I should look it up in the dictionary. Even as a kid, I thought that advice was silly. How can I find a word that I don't know how to spell? Situational awareness. Drove out on an errand yesterday. Every single person walking, jogging with headphones, mother pushing baby in a stroller, dog owner walking with their dog, were all on their phones and not paying attention to their surroundings. This is actually the best comment in this thread. You forgot about the people actively piloting cars while their eyes are on their freaking phones. T9 texting. Dude, I think I have a vague memory of what T9 texting was and I never bothered to learn it. Would the equivalent today be like swipe texting? That's pretty popular. Printed MapQuest pages. Now that is a blast from the past. I totally remember having to print out MapQuest stuff. More than 10 years ago, I made a list of physical devices that have been replaced by apps on my phone. And here's the list. Narrator here. The list was pretty long, and I kinda just wanted to talk about some of the comments that were attached to the list. Oddly enough, books seem to be the first one to really reverse on going digital. For as much as I like my Kindle for travel, I still much rather have a physical book. See vinyl for music. It's probably due to the eyesore from reading from a digital screen, and the experience of being immersed into picking up a book without distractions. E-readers might solve the eye strain issue, but nothing beats reading print. Just the joy of turning the page to find out what happens next rather than pressing a button to flip to the next page, or the joy of placing a bookmark to come back the next day. There used to be so many different artistic cover arts. All these trivial things add up to the reader's immersion. Yeah, printed books are such a better experience. I am someone who likes to highlight certain things in books, mostly just books where I learn things. And I'm sure there are apps that will let you do that as well on phones, but nothing beats just flipping through a book and seeing the bright highlighted paragraphs. It's just so much easier to find important things. One word, encyclopedias. Bar arguments. No. Player X was the MVP in 1984. They're so easily solvable now. A fun 2-hour debate now lasts 9 to 14 seconds. I used to work with this loudmouth guy in the mid-2000s that would spout off made-up facts and figures during our lunch breaks. That grounded to a halt once one of us got smartphones by 2008 and just fact-checked on the spot using Google. I will say this doesn't really work with pathological liars though. They'll just say, well, I did it, or the website's wrong. Actual buttons. Rest in peace, BlackBerry. The need to just pick a random restaurant in an unfamiliar area and hope it doesn't suck. Also being restricted to only listening to what music is on the radio or on a CD in your car. For real. The younger generation will never know the hype of hearing your favorite song playing on the radio when you knew you couldn't just listen to it at any moment. Bonus thing the younger generation will never have to deal with is having to watch reruns of an anime hoping that you get the next episode. I can't tell you how many times that I saw Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z get his arm broken by Android 18 to only find out that the whole show resets back to episode 1. But man, that moment we finally got the next episode was so hype. Reading magazines while pooping. But if you've ever seen those videos about what happens when you flush a toilet, those magazines must be disgusting. At least you can clean the surface of your phone pretty easily. Photo development departments in stores. As someone who used to work in a photo place from time to time, this is probably for the best. You don't know how often people would go into a photo center trying to print copyrighted material, and we would have to turn them away and they usually got mad. Also, there was plenty of people that wanted to get their spicy photos printed at the store too. It was wild. Teens' mental health. I'd like to counter with everyone's mental health. Simply enjoying a moment. I went to a show last night and so many people were watching the show through their phone screens while recording it. In between sets, so many people would pull out their phones and watch TikToks and whatnot. Some even did this while the band was performing. I left my phone in my bag for the entirety of this show. I may not have captured memories, but I felt I was more involved with what was happening than those who couldn't set their phone aside for 5 minutes. It's the truth, and I'm happy I realized a good decade plus ago. I don't know why, but I love watching people take videos of fireworks. Just enjoy the fireworks. You're not going to rewatch the video. Honestly, even at sporting events, I see people on their phones mid-game. Sometimes just videotaping plays, or literally just scrolling through social media. I get unnecessarily annoyed by people recording fireworks. Fireworks are this full sensory experience of sound, size, and sight. It's a feeling in your body even. A phone video won't capture 95% of that experience. There has to be something more than just pointless recording. And fireworks have to be the top one for me. Unless, of course, it's a fireworks show gone wrong and they all explode at once. Now that's awesome. I will say, phones have helped us expose just how dumb people really are. I feel like every year there is a video of someone blowing off their hands with firecrackers. They explode, people. Don't hold them in your hands. The phrase, "you won't have a calculator in your pocket in the real world." Accidentally getting lost and finding something cool that you normally wouldn't have been able to experience. The expectation that you will be unreachable. The privilege of not picking up the phone and the person who called would assume that you weren't there. Nothing like when someone answered the phone and you just had to wave to that person to tell them you weren't home. Those were the days. Just enjoying the moment. Anytime me and my girlfriend are doing something nice together, she always wants to grab a picture or make a post on Instagram. If I kick up a fuss, she'll tell me that she's capturing the moment. But now the moment is tainted with distraction. I have physically wrestled my sister's phone away from her at family gatherings because she was incapable of not doing this, and using it to text updates / pictures to friends and family about what we were doing at that moment. And if you think that sounds like normal teenage behavior, you should probably know that my sister just turned 50 this year. This is a double-edged sword in my opinion because I have 2 aunts that do the same thing. They love taking photos. Not necessarily for social media, but just in general. It can be annoying, but it's also nice that someone is taking photos while everyone else can enjoy the party. Plus, those photos can easily be shared through digital albums. People talking to each other while eating. My father always had his attention on the newspaper during breakfast, and before smartphones, I spent so long reading books while eating that I still in a habit of eating one-handed as though I'm holding a book. Bro, ain't that the truth? Nowadays, people look at YouTube before eating rather than talking to people, or watching whatever's on TV at the moment. Every little thing we do is in our control, and it's hard to control. My sister-in-law's husband is notorious at this. He will spend all dinner with his face in his phone watching stuff, most of the time without headphones on. And often at a restaurant, so she'll order his drinks and meals like he's a 5-year-old. Or if we try to even ask him a question, he'll just ignore it. We'll have a conversation with her, then he'll interrupt whatever it is we're talking about, important or not, just to show her what's on his phone. And if she doesn't immediately answer, he'll say, "Did you hear what I said?" Or he'll just be a supremely butthead and say, "You always ignore me." Now a lot of this is because he gets away with it, and my sister-in-law enables it. And then there's the part where he's just a huge jerk. I got two things I want to say on these comments. One, if you say the phrase my sister-in-law's husband, doesn't that make them your brother? Why not just say my brother? And two, what I think the original comment might have meant was people actually having conversations at dinner, for example, on a date. Things have gotten so bad that people play a game at restaurants where the first person to touch their phone has to pay for the bill. I would say if games like that are having to be created, phones are a problem. Patience. You used to have to look up a phone number, call someone, leave a message, and wait for them to call you back. Everything now is instant. People have completely lost all patience with each other, along with human decency. Knocking on doors when you get to someone's house. In America, that'll get you shot now, apparently. Horizontal videos. I hate vertical videos with a damn passion. My biggest screens are horizontal, people. You are denying clarity for those watching anywhere else outside of their phone. Also, I hate watching videos on my phone. Okay, I don't really have a dog in this fight, but I will say, the one thing that does annoy me about vertical videos is that they don't look nice when displayed. If you don't know what I mean, go check your YouTube sub box at some point, and if you're subscribed to someone who does shorts, the thumbnails for those videos are all lame. YouTube is starting to notice this by adding tabs to separate the content, but it needs to happen a lot faster. Humanity, manners, and the ability to listen to someone who disagrees with you. The coming age of boys that will never know the joy of finding a random spicy magazine. Newspapers. Been in the industry for a while, and it's unfortunately dying slowly. Daily circulation numbers are pathetic. Most store copies are returned and dozens of jobs lost just this year. It's a real shame. People's brains, sanity, drive, and a few other things. In return, we got 24/7 hour tracking. Not a good deal if I say so myself. My ability to drive without getting road rage. Every mother freaker that cuts me off and slows down or nearly swerves into me from the other lane, they're on their freaking phones. People who read books. Not necessarily all of them, but I rarely ever see them around anymore, and it's kinda sad. Imagination. Now I could see how phones do hurt imagination, but I've always had this theory that some people have imagination and others don't. I've always been curious how many substance users have imagination before using substances. I feel like that may be their first experience with imagination because they're usually going on some kind of trip. Conversations. Sure, everyone texts more than ever, but people don't seem to talk face to face. I see so many people standing next to each other looking at their phones, probably texting each other. The smartphone replaced the cigarette. We used to all sit around and smoke and talk to each other. I miss sitting for hours smoking and talking. That era is gone. Glad cigs are basically gone though. Lung disease is terrible, but we all lost convos along the way. I'm pretty sure that type of conversation still exists. People have just replaced cigarettes with other things. Decent games to a degree. The casual gaming genre picked up and moved to mobile, then it began to suck. Think back to the glory days of playing Plants vs. Zombies or Fish Tycoon on the computer. When it picked up and moved to mobile, it didn't immediately suck. Some casual games were mostly the same, just cheaper and touchscreen. Also, some new concepts utilize gyro and touchscreen controls in some cool ways. Doodle Jump, Fruit Ninja, stuff like that. But when data/Wi-Fi connections became more accessible, Facebook browsing games came to mobile. Think Farmville, Dragon City, Candy Crush. The free-to-play model took over, and now you're hard-pressed to find a decent offline game for mobile anymore. The classics are hardly even available, since they began to lack support for the newest Android/iOS update and were steadily removed from the App Store. Try and find Plant Tycoon, the original Angry Birds, or anything awesome you remember from the Advent casual mobile games. It's most certainly gone. It's probably been terribly recreated and made into a free-to-play model now. All I have to say in this argument is Konami, the company that created one of the greatest video game series ever in Metal Gear Solid, said that they were going to focus on mobile games aggressively. When free games like Fortnite are bringing in millions, why bother with great story games, right? It's sad, but true. Ability to speak in younger generations. I have two nephews, 18 and 15 years old. They can't fathom the idea of picking up the phone to call someone, to maybe order food, make a reservation, or even worse, calling your crush's house and not knowing who's going to pick up the phone. The genuine sense of panic they have just thinking about the world with no texting is just as alien to them as the sense of panic for calling is alien to me. To be fair here, I will say I've never been a fan of having to call to make an appointment or something like that. It's not the idea of talking to another person, it's when they ask you a question you don't have an answer to. Like if it has to deal with insurance or some type of bank number that you don't know. I just don't like the awkwardness that comes with it, and they're like, well, we kind of need that, and I'm like, I don't know how to get that, man. That's what I don't like about phone calls. People at the library. Not only has book reading diminished, but people used to go to the library to get online. Now that phones do that, libraries just seem almost deserted. Men having the balls to approach a woman they're interested in. That has nothing to do with smartphones, my guy. The plots of a lot of 90s sitcoms. There is a Sex and the City episode that comes to mind where the plot of the episode revolves around two characters waiting at separate entrances of a building, each thinking the other stood them up. The plot doesn't hold up at all in modern times because someone would have called or texted and they would have found each other in minutes. When two impatient people try to meet, they still end up not finding each other no matter how good technology gets. Character 1 texting, "Where are you?" Character 2, "Where are you? I'm at the entrance." Character 1, "No, I'm at the entrance." "Nice gaslighting attempt though," blocks character 1. Character 2, "Tell me where you are right now. Hey, talk to me. Pick up the phone, please. Fine." Man, just thinking about it, if that sequence was in TV, that would be horrible. I think I'd rather go with the approach of the 90s sitcom. One thing I haven't seen on this list, but I think is definitely aided by the rise of smartphones, is customer service. Maybe it's because texting seems to be the younger generation's preferred form of communication, but I swear, customer service has never been as bad as I've seen it today. Also, I worked retail for over 5 years, so I know how much it can suck and how you just want to quit at all times. But I still tried to provide people with helpful service, especially if someone was cool or nice. But nowadays, people just stare at you like they're dead inside and want you to leave as fast as possible so they could check their phone again. It just kind of sucks.
Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff of Reddit. What are your experiences, funny, sad, horrible, with people waking from anesthesia, not safe for work? A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. Had a patient in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we place a speculum, think ball gag, but a metal ring instead of a ball, in the mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they're under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole OR erupted in laughter. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she has always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off, and sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This was probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day, was completely with it, and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up, and the first thing he asked was, "Do I still have my balls?" And I told him, "Yep, both of them." And he said, "Both? Aw, you guys are great." Not hospital staff, but my great-grandfather had surgery one time, and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a German POW camp. He recognized me and told me I had to help him escape by killing the guards, nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16, obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in, he was calm and kept motioning with his head at her to me and finally looked at me and said, "Kill her, now!" She always came back with another male nurse after that. Nurse here, this really big, hairy Turkish guy, whom I've never met before, told me how much he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male, by the way. He wanted to kiss you. I hate this comment. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam. He was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told her that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon, she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained that he destroyed the entire restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. Not the doctor or the nurse, but I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7, I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cued the following conversation. Why are the Rugrats on? You woke up earlier and said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry. Why did I want to be angry? You said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time. Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in the bed of the hospital room, waiting for surgery. They already gave me meds to calm me, but they knocked me out. 2 nurses come in to move me to a gurney, but they were small and I'm big, so they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs saying, "You're snoring, roll over," and I rolled right onto the gurney. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been in a ward, etc. prior to the operation. Hold up, I'm talking about this. I am ranting about this right now. Why do people feel the need to put etc. in places that it doesn't belong? It's one item and it's not even part of a list. If you have more than 3 things to say, you can put etc. at the end of it and have it make sense. But if you say, I was in a place, etc., that's only one place. Etc. means and so on and so forth and the rest, etc. Redditors, learn to English. Now we can move on. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue." My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed, repeatedly muttering, "Where are his legs? Where are his legs?" I always cross my legs when I sit and lay down, and apparently I must have done this as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled, "They're right here," and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mom was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my sack is itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down to my skin so I can scratch my sack. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down an excess of smooth skin, then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that someone has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours, and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "Oh, Mum, they shaved my pubes. I'm not happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's not right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified, and she's trying to get me to calm down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time, it was a serious issue. So I'm an ER tech, and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time, I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated. So we sedated her, put the tube in, and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went in to prep her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation, so with the EMT standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter. Then, she queefs. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her, and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps and then looks over to the EMTs and says in an attempt at a sexy voice, "You boys ever seen a black coochie before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room and the nurse is crouching on the ground trying not to die. I, since I still have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom, and I'm forced to try to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the ER. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 plus. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you just come home with me and my wife?" Yes, he was propositioning a 3-way with a 50-year-old, 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moment of my life. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued, my wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did so, I told her, "Mom, you have lots of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a freaking sloth in here." How do we catch one? They're so fast. Then she tried to take my jeans off of me so I could go to sleep, and I yelled, "Whoa there, Missy," when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred, "My name is Worcestershire sauce." No, wait, that's not a cool name. "My name is Shark." Wish I was earlier to this one. My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes, she told her mother, "Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his woohoo in my mouth." It was awkward. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I apparently called my Middle Eastern surgeon a sly Arabian tooth chief after coming to. That was fun to learn about when I regained mental clarity. I had surgery on my wrist and came out of anesthesia screaming, "My balls hurt!" The doctor came in and asked what was wrong. I said, "My balls hurt!" He replied, "Dude, you had wrist surgery. No one touched your balls." 2 stories. 1, I had a lady in her 70s who drank martinis and took Xanax all day every day, so she had such a strong tolerance to the sedation I was giving her that she totally stopped breathing while still awake. I had to say, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to bag you now," and she mouthed okay, and I put the ambu bag on her face and force breathed for her until she got her respiratory effort back. 2, I was in helping with the heart procedure, and the patient went into complete heart block and his heart stopped beating. I hop up to the table and start chest compressions while they are hurriedly trying to put in a temporary pacing wire. I had an arterial pressure waveform on the monitor, so I could see exactly how hard to do the chest compressions, and the man never lost consciousness. So I'm doing chest compressions on a dude while he looks right at my face the whole time. So it was like, press, sorry, press, sorry, for about 2 minutes until the pacing wire was in place. Not a doc, but a few years ago I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. 1, going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this, I apparently looked at the tech and asked him to remove the mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said no, and I passed out halfway through my response of, "Aww." 2, still very out of it, getting ready to be discharged after a day of recovery. It was very bad and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I looked down and my hand was red and there was a growing red spot on the gown. I look up and see the color drain from my mother's face, to which I respond, "It's cool, I got this." But back in the bed, hit the call button and say, "I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. I'm not in pain, but there is a fair amount of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they are free, that would be awesome." Not 15 seconds later, a nurse comes flying into the room, looks, says, "Holy crap, be right back with supplies," and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, "I figured I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing." I mean, he's not wrong. Kind of a W. I was the patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth taken out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected in recovery. Early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed, and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them, and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back on the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. When I got all 4 of my wisdom teeth taken out, the nurse tried to put me in a wheelchair. Cue dialogue. "Let's get you in a wheelchair." "I got it, baby." Think Fetty Wap type accent. I'm very white. "Oh, no, I don't think that's a good idea." Tries to stand, but slams into wall and slides down face first. "Oh no!" She put me in the wheelchair and rolled me to the car. I giggled the whole way there while leaning my head on her hand and looking up at her face. Side note, hands down the best 2 weeks of summer I've ever had. KFC potatoes and ice cream all day while in a drug stupor? Heck yes. I hear I just played Minecraft with my little brother and dug enormous holes the entire time. Came out of anesthetic, and the lead nurse decides it's time to tell me all about post-op care. She says, "Now this is going to be a pain in the butt," and I said, "If that's the case, then you guys performed the wrong procedure." It was a nose operation. The assistant nurse started laughing. Lead nurse, not so amused. Not a doc or nurse. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the IV anesthetic. Apparently, before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said to my best Connery, "Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk?" The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone asked him in a haze. "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to sleep." Not a doctor. A friend was in a car crash pretty bad. He was in a coma for 2 months and he had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on him, he would reach up and grab her breast, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about it, he didn't believe us, so we asked her and she confirmed it. She said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. I was the patient, but I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy. In this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery, I half roll over and let rip the biggest fart in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse, ask, "Was that me?" Jaw on the ground, she nods, and I go back to sleep. I was working in the pediatric ER and sedating a skater kid, 14 or 15. We're talking more a wannabe suburban kid rather than a punk. Kind of kid that obviously joined a frat in college. His mom is there in the room as he starts waking up once we had his wrist set and in the cast. His mom is typical well-to-do suburban mom who spends lots of time at yoga and PTA meetings, i.e. not trashy at all, and family was likely from a well-to-do part of town. My buddy, who is fairly hairy on his arms, etc., we don't need to have this discussion again, reached across his upper chest to grab an IV line. Kid was half asleep, raised his head up with his eyes still closed, and licked my buddy's arm with this exaggerated lick like it was an ice cream cone. Kid flops his head back onto the pillow, and his mom just looks mortified in the 2 to 3 seconds that pass before he slurs out, "Man, I sure do love to lick some." His mom immediately turned bright red and walked out of the room, and we all busted out laughing except the guy who got licked. The ER doc was this young petite girl, and she said she peed herself a little, she was laughing so hard. For months, we would give that guy lick emotions in the air when we passed him in the hall and putting Rolling Stone stickers in his locker, etc. I still give him crap about that from time to time. My favorite is to catch him chatting or something, standing at the desk, and to lean over and sniff his forearm and ask if he's been fishing. Not a nurse, but I have a good one. It's been 15 years and I'm still horrified when I think about it. I have to preface the story by saying that I have a super conservative, girl next door type of personality. I am shy, somewhat of an introvert, and most definitely never want to be the center of attention on purpose. I went in for a colonoscopy with the yum-yum juice that made me forget everything that happened, although I vaguely remember talking and hearing laughter. When I woke up, people were smirking and glancing at each other, trying to suppress their laughter. I asked if something happened, and the staff reassured me that everything was good. So when the doctor came in to talk to me before I was released, I asked him if something funny had happened. He reassured me that I had a very normal procedure and then told me that sometimes the medication caused people to lower their inhibitions, but that the effect wore off very quickly, as does the medication. I asked him what he meant by lowering their inhibitions, and he paused again and reassured me that it happens to a lot of people. So yeah, I spent my entire colonoscopy talking dirty to my doctor and his tools. I never went back to that doctor again. TLDR, yum-yum juice made me say dirty things to the doctor, change doctors, and consider moving out of state due to my humiliation. I had to get hardware installed in my leg for a nasty bone break at an overseas base. A few days later, my buddy and I were having lunch on base. A group of women came in and sat down at the table next to us, and we struck up a conversation. One of them asked what I had gotten done. I was in a huge cast and on crutches. I tell her the procedure. She gets a funny look on her face and asked when it was done. I tell her the date. She immediately starts laughing and tells her friends, "This is the guy!" Now they're all howling with laughter. It took a while to tell the story because they're in tears from laughing. Apparently, when I was coming out of sedation, I grabbed a corpsman's butt and hung on for dear life, who was the woman I was currently talking to at the restaurant. I just wanted to crawl into a hole when I heard the story. TLDR, grabbed a girl's butt in the OR, got nicknamed by the staff, and became the talk of the hospital for a while. Edit. My top comment is how I perved on some poor woman when I was out of my gourd on drugs. Wonderful. I was the patient, but I had to get 5 teeth pulled. The nurse was helping my mom shuffle me to the car. I turned to thank her, but couldn't get my mouth to work, so I bowed and doffed an imaginary cap. My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the drugs, 3 nurses walked in that were rather attractive. He looks up with his wife in the room and says, "If I would have known there was going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big woohoo!" I've had a vasectomy, so this one is especially funny to me since they usually only use localized numbing agents. Unless he got a special doctor, that comment was 100% him. I woke up in a recovery room after having my wisdom teeth out, and no one was in there with me, so I thought it'd be a good idea to get up and have a look around. Apparently, I had been awake a minute before and asked the doctor for some water, but when she left to get it, I went in and out of consciousness and forgot all about it. They were pretty terrified when I just up and vanished. A few months later, my brother had his wisdom teeth out. We left the surgeons with no issue, but on the drive home, my brother lost his mind. I had to take a circuitous route home because my brother wanted to see the circus. Every house we drove past, he was pointing out imaginary animals and giggling hysterically. He was 17 at the time. Anesthesia apparently does weird stuff to us. While not medical, I was a prison officer doing an escort for and handcuffed to a prisoner having a minor procedure done under general anesthetic. After the procedure, he starts waking up and chatting about stuff. Then he starts telling me about his mobile phone he had smuggled in, the make and model, and how he keeps it plugged in his butt. Edit for those asking, I completed a security report and submitted it to the prison police department, I forget the names, and as with the prisoner I saw swallowing drugs smuggled in, nothing happened. It was a small think phone. I think it was the Samsung Juke around 10 years ago, a finger from a latex glove to wrap it. I've been under anesthesia several times over the last 3 years, and no, I'm not a doctor or nurse either. The most recent time, however, I went in for an outpatient procedure where a stent was placed into a ureter, tube that leads to kidney. They go through your urethra to put it in, hence the anesthesia. Anyhow, it took more than the normal dose to put me under, and my wife later told me that when I came to, I was playing with myself and asking her if she wanted to take a ride to make sure this thing still works before we get out of here. The nurse was there at the time also. My wife told me she attempted to keep me covered for the nurse's sake, but I wasn't having it. I have no recollection of those events. Not a professional, medical or otherwise, but on the way home from the dentist, I was gone, and something in my mind remembered Metal Gear Solid, and I started yelling, "Liquid!" a la Snake. Apparently, I almost caused my mom to crash the car, and it quickly became annoying very fast, as one can imagine. Just coming out of surgery, and the nurse says, "I'm going to take your temperature now," to which I respond, "Will you give it back?" I'm not the medical professional in this story. My husband had emergency surgery a few years ago, and when he woke up, he was just different. I can't explain it. He recognized who I was, but his personality was completely different, and the way he spoke to me was completely different. It's sort of like in movies where people wake up in someone else's body. It freaked me the heck out. 36 hours later, it was like he just woke up and was himself again. The weird part is, he had no memory of the past 36 hours. He remembers being sick and he remembers the emergency room, but after that, nothing. A lot of people came to visit him in that time period too, a bunch of family and everyone from the office, and he has no memory of any of them. The only thing that I can think of is that whatever medication that was used in the anesthesia that gorked him finally worked its way out of his system. Thank you for the new verb, to gork. While on fentanyl for gallstones in the ER, I asked the ultrasound tech if she wanted to take a selfie with me. She declined and I got butthurt about it. Apparently, I also told my sweet grandmother, when asked if I was okay, that I was, "Fine, Gran, I'm high as giraffe balls."
What event or incident happened at your job that caused a mass firing or a mass quitting? All the engineers at one job I was in had their contracts changed so that they had to buy their own tools. Due to the specialist nature of our jobs, we were all looking at over £4,000 per engineer. 10 walked and the rest threatened to strike. The boss had to give in and buy the tools himself. They had their contracts changed? I'm not an expert, but isn't that illegal? Probably yes. But the boss was such a butt, he felt he could do as he pleased with his servants. Many times he would just have the engineers working on Christmas Day. If you complained about it, he would just tell you to stop whining or get another job. One poor sod was made to work the day his wife went into labor, and he missed the birth of his child. He wasn't even allowed to phone the hospital. In the early 90s, I worked for a large construction company in Florida. I was on the road crew. One of the machines we used was called a mixer. The objective of this machine was to mix up the subgrade of a road. It had giant teeth that spin insanely fast. Well, my crew had laid down the dirt, lime rock and clay, and now had to run the mixer over it. Well, someone set the blades too low and ripped an international fiber optic cable out of the ground. A clean cut would have been bad, but this cable was shredded beyond belief. It cost $100,000 per hour that this cable was down. Luckily, I wasn't at work that day. When I came in the next day, anyone who was even near the incident got fired. My whole crew was extinct. To put it into perspective, the cable was fatter than your upper leg and composed of thousands of glass strands. Every strand had to be fused back together. It cost the company millions. Total about 40 people that day were fired, and I was put on another crew. Man, that's gotta suck if you were simply the guy holding the stop or slow sign that day. The idea is probably that everyone on the crew has a responsibility to be aware of what's going on and notice egregious errors. Not sure that it's reasonable in this particular case, but it might be. I used to work at a pickle factory in Michigan. When the new owners took over, they insisted that they change the recipe that had been the same for over 50 years without consulting the workers. Some of the employees' parents and grandparents had worked there and apparently felt so strongly about the recipe that 13 people quit and the majority were outside with signs the next days, until eventually they switched it almost all the way back. None of those who quit came back. I didn't quit and I actually enjoyed both recipes, but now I can't tolerate the smell or taste of pickles. I used to love them. I don't know what changed in your life to make you not enjoy pickles anymore. Perhaps having a wealth of them to eat at any given times. Anyway, hope you recover, strange pickle man. I work in local government for an urban county. One of the IT departments reclassified all their employees as exempt, a designation designed for political appointments, fired them all, only exempt employees can be fired without cause, and asked them to submit resumes if they wanted their jobs back. Their goal was to get rid of some employees they felt were dead weight. But it turns out the most valued employees, the ones with readily marketable skills in the prime of their careers, just shook their heads and had jobs elsewhere by the end of the week. Furthermore, when you pull a stunt like that, word gets out and resumes don't come flooding in. They are still trying to recover. I tried this with my dog. Haven't seen him in 2 years. Next time, don't pee on the floor, Baxter. Please come back. Worked in a bar in a nightclub. Restaurant by day, club by night. 5 bartenders behind the bar on any given Friday and Saturday, plus barbacks. Thought something was weird about our credit card tips. Went to the bar manager. We collect receipts and checkouts plus paychecks for a few weeks, examine them. Someone is withholding quite a bit of our tips. Fast forward to a Friday night, busy as heck. Owner comes in to see how things are going. Bar manager confronts him. Owner denies wrongdoing, claims what he's doing is legal. It wasn't, he was pocketing the withheld tips. Bar manager signals for me to come over, threatens to quit if the owner doesn't return the money he stole. Owner more or less says, TS. Bar manager walks out. I lean into the bar long enough to tell one of the other bartenders what happened, give the owner a snarky wave, and follow him out. 5 minutes later, the rest of the bar staff join us, and we wander down the road to another bar to commiserate over the bullcrap. Left over 500 people in the club with no bar staff. 0 Fs given. Found out a few days later that the daytime serving staff heard what happened and quit too. Last I heard, they had to shut down for a few weeks to restaff. Still overly proud of myself for that. Screw that guy. I was working retail and many of the workers engaged in mass exodus because the only manager anybody really liked quit. The way it happened was this. One employee was a recent hire. He basically got the position because 2 of his friends already worked there and they vouched for him. He regularly slacked off, got caught taking extra breaks, was never around when anybody needed him, and was generally a waste of space. One day, the manager everyone loves is on duty. He sends this kid out to collect carts from the lot. Now, a big group of this kid's friends have just arrived in the store. The kid goes and finds another employee and says, "Hey, the manager told me to tell you to go get the carts out of the lot," and proceeds to follow his friends around the store doing nothing. Manager sees the other employee collecting carts and asks him why he's doing it, as it's not his usual duty. So-and-so told me that you wanted me to get the carts." Manager, knowing the kid has a record as a really poor employee, is furious, hunts him down in the store and takes him to the office for a reprimand. After the reprimand, the kid leaves out the front of the store. He brings back 2 carts over the next 20 minutes. Finally, manager notices that we're completely out of carts. It's now been half an hour since he reprimanded this kid and sent him to the lot. So he goes outside to see what's up. Kid is leaning against the front wall of the building on his phone with his girlfriend. Manager fires him on the spot. The kid goes to HR to get his last check the next day. Sits down with HR manager and says that the manager everyone likes is selling illicit substances to employees, many of whom were minors, on work time. Then goes outside and calls the manager phone and leaves a message that he's going to F him up for firing him. The whole store goes nuts. There are accusations flying from management at everybody. Every single employee is pulled to HR and interrogated. Did this manager ever sell you substances? Have you ever seen him sell someone else substances? Have you ever seen him use substances? Have you ever heard him talk about using substances? No, no, no. And everyone they talk to points the finger at this disgruntled ex-employee. Everyone knows he started the rumor mill going to try and get back at his manager. The manager plays the recorded message for management that this kid left on work cell, but they dismiss it because there's no way to know it's him. Grilling continues for 3 or 4 days. Some people are pulled for multiple interviews. Gossip starts that they're going to fire this manager. They don't have any solid evidence against him, but this ex-employee and his 2 friends who still work at the store have provided stories that match one another. Well, no crap, they hang out every day and these interviews lasted almost a week. Enough that they think the manager needs to be fired. Manager doesn't wait for them to do it. He walks in one day and says, "Screw this, I quit. I drafted my letter of resignation when this crap started. Here's my keys." About half the employees on staff walked right out there when he did. Almost everyone else quit within the next week. The last I heard, the only people who didn't quit were the 2 friends of the kid who never did his job. Does anyone else who's ever worked a bad hospitality or retail job get the vicarious sense of joy out of these stories? Who am I kidding? You clicked the thumbnail for some sweet quitting fantasies. My mum used to work for a college. She started there as a secretary when the college was just starting out and gradually moved up until she was running the whole business department. Without her knowing, the college ran interviews and hired a woman to be her superior. They never asked my mum to apply for the position and never mentioned it to her until the day this woman is introduced to her. And my mum's boss informed my mum she was supposed to train this woman to be her boss for the department. My mum was clearly hurt and upset, but she needed her job and she couldn't quit, so she sucked it up and trained this woman while putting on her best face and being cordial. All the rest of the people who worked under my mum in the department could not stand this woman and were incredibly upset by the situation as well. One morning, my mum walks through the doors and the boss of the college is waiting for her. He brings her into his office and fires her. Within the month, the rest of the department all quit as well, leaving them to hire and train all new people right before the fall semester started. 6 months later, the woman they hired to replace my mum quit, and they had the balls to call my mum and ask her back. You can guess where she told them to shove it. I was hired by a man who owned 3 pizza chain stores. I trained at one store, worked there for a few months when I found out he wanted me to transfer to a different store, and after a few weeks become the manager. Woohoo! Well, the new store, the current manager, every single day spent a few hours on the phone with her significant other, screaming and yelling and crying, right in front of customers. The employees would get high in the walk-in fridge. I'm not actually too bothered by that if they actually did any more work than the total minimum. So here I am, hired by the store owner, not the manager, who had hired all of her friends. They didn't like me, they called me a B-word, a goody two-shoes, they were absolutely right. I fired all of them except for one new girl that started the week before I did. It was a glorious moment, the most B-word moment of my life. Mother frickers won't help me mop the floor, you're fired. Our company was bought by a larger company. The sales and marketing team got a new boss. Within a few weeks of this first meeting with the new boss, 75% of the team quit. No one outside of the team knew why. A few months later, I met the new head of sales and marketing. He was insane. When one of the top sales guys put his 2 weeks notice in, he was escorted off the company property within an hour. The next guy who resigned was told that he had to work the rest of the week with no pay so he could transfer his accounts over. Someone in HR had to explain to him that this is slavery and illegal. In conclusion, the new boss was insane and tried to bring slavery back. Our general manager was fired, everyone loved him, and they brought in a new GM who took away ending times to shifts, so we had to stay until he said we could go, while most of us were college students trying to schedule classes. And he took away all of the employee perks, we even had to pay full price on a $1 sub day. Everyone quit. There were only 2 people working there 2 months later. I worked at Wendy's. One of the shift managers quit for personal reasons, so the regional manager had all the other shift managers cover the now open shifts. The shift managers were now working overtime and didn't want to. They gave the regional manager a deadline of a month to get a new shift manager. A month goes by and the shift managers confront the regional manager because there's been no replacements. Turns out he hasn't even posted a job listing yet. They were so livid that all of them quit on the same day. Now the regional manager had to take all the shifts until he could hire new people, and he did a terrible job too. Normally 4 to 6 people were working at a time at our location because it wasn't dead slow, but wasn't a hotspot. 6 only usually hitting a few hours overlap during expected rushes. With him as manager, he expected 7 people to be working all the time. This means he increased all of our hours as well, and had no respect for the hours people usually worked. This caused another mass exodus of normal workers, including me, because I didn't want to work full-time while going to school. I don't know if anyone else has had the boss that refuses to take a single step to solve the acknowledged problem in a workplace they promised to fix, but I have, and I still relish the day I shouted at them and walked out. Train company in Sweden. One day, many years ago, someone found a document stating some changes to overtime policy. It was just lying on a table in the middle of the break room. 1 copy only. Due to the nature of the business, there tends to be a lot of shifting hours back and forth. Sometimes we, drivers, can get home hours and hours early, and other times we get horrendously late. Hence, overtime. The document stated that now overtime forms had to be filled for when we come home early. Undertime, so to speak. This otherwise already scheduled time would be withdrawn, and the company would then be able to reuse that time. Negative overtime. 1 copy on a table, and a few hours later people had come in from all over in a major huff. There were outright and immediate resignations, shouting matches, phone calls to union representatives, a huge outcry overall. Date on the document and the day it was found, April 1st. Much fun was had. No one got into any trouble from what I recall. It was from the higher-ups, and pretty much everyone else in administrative staff knew about it. Still, they hadn't quite anticipated the crap storm. Even telling people that it was an April Fool's joke to their faces didn't work. Oh wow, beautiful from a very watch the world burn kind of way. I worked in a call center and they got us all together on April 1st and told us they were going to lay off 20% of the workforce, and we all chuckled. It wasn't a joke. April 1st is the first day of the third fiscal quarter, midpoint of the year. Please tell me someone got in deep crap for that first bad joke. We had something similar happen. One day we got a mail from some higher-ups that the reception desk would now only be open from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m. Some people got upset, stating that it was freaking stupid, they can't run a company like this, until someone, me, pointed out that it was April 1st. People in the office calmed down, realizing they wouldn't do something that dumb. Plot twist, the next day, it wasn't a joke. They were serious. In a team of 30 IT consultants that had been working a big project for a couple of years, the standing offer that governed rates, etc. had been defined and would continue for the next few years. But the renewal deadline for each of our individual contracts with the contracting company, middleman, was just a week away and we hadn't seen the paperwork, just promises that we were being renewed. Finally get to the paperwork and see a 10% cut in rates. Quite surprised because the standing offer didn't have any such change. Contracting company says the client department renegotiated new rates by saying that another company would be used instead. We were shocked that the client would put such a big project at risk. People made inquiries. It turns out the client department had made no such changes. The contracting company was just making a grab for a bigger piece of the pie. There was outrage. People quit. Other people yelled and got fired, etc. The company had to quickly backpedal and claim it was an administrative error. Yeah, right. But the damage was done. It didn't end there, though. About 6 months later, a small group of consultants on another project merged with us. They had been working under the same contract vehicle. As we're getting to know these 5 guys, one of them says, "That 30% cut 6 months ago was nasty, eh?" Turns out the company got from these guys what they couldn't get from us, and these poor suckers hadn't known it was fiction. Crap hits the fan once again. The 5 quit en masse. Problem was their jobs were critical. They got hired back with hefty raises, almost double their original if memory serves. Stupid, greedy company. I worked in the corporate headquarters for a large national retailer. After 20 years in business, the company was sold to an arrogant billionaire who put his son in charge. His first job after completing his MBA. The son decided to relocate headquarters 500 miles away, close to his daddy's headquarters. He gave us 30 days notice to move, with no moving compensation, or lose our jobs. Out of 300 employees, 1 moved. I accepted a new position the day after the announcement, and gave 2 weeks' notice. My boss went ballistic and said, "What are we supposed to do? No one can fill your job here, and we won't have anyone new until we move. You're not a team player." Bonus, the company was out of business within 60 days after the move, 4 days after the acquisition. They had spent $50 million to buy it. "You're not a team player," he shouts as he upends his team's lives on a whim for his own personal comfort. My goodness. Competing company in a similar but not identical line of business tried for years to replicate our product with no success. They scrapped the project and took the R&D money and bought our company instead. Fired 600 people in 1 day. I was one of them. I hear from those who remained the place is awful now. I was the lead cook in a $1 million kitchen at a multi-million-dollar high-end restaurant. The executive chef had been there since they opened and worked his way from the bottom to the top in 4 years. That place was his whole life and he was completely dedicated to it. The absentee owners had hired a do-nothing, know-nothing manager. After weeks of complaining, the owners had a meeting with the manager and gave him a week to get on top of his job. The chef went on vacation that week. The manager saw this as an opportunity to buddy up with the owners. A week and 2 rounds of golf later, the chef comes back to work to a pink slip. 27 out of 30 employees came in and resigned immediately after. Oh boy, I think I might have a winning story. When I was in high school, I took a part-time job doing tech support for a dial-up ISP. The company was pretty small and only had a handful of employees. The owner's wife did HR and accounting. Her brother was in charge of the technical operations and was my boss, plus a web developer and the regular tech support guy, who were best friends. There were also a handful of developers at a sister company which develops custom software. My work schedule was evenings a few days per week, plus normal hours on the weekend. My boss was usually there before me on Saturdays, but one week I was surprised to find that the office was locked. As the day progressed, I became increasingly confused by the fact that nobody else had shown up. There was almost always a few people at least passing through, but I'd been there all morning without seeing anyone at all. Finally, after a few hours, my boss walks in and said, "You're probably wondering where everyone is." He told me that everyone except me, the owner and his wife, had quit. He wouldn't say why, but he assured me that it wasn't something I needed to worry about, and that, since his job was vital, he was going to stay at the company until a replacement could be found. I tried to find out what was happening, but he said I'd have to talk to the owner. When the owner arrived, there was clearly tension between the two of them. He also wouldn't tell me what happened, but was very eager to make sure I wasn't going to jump ship. Eventually they hired new employees and found a replacement for my boss, and things went back to normal. But I still didn't have any idea what the hell happened, and the owner clearly wasn't interested in discussing it. Cut to a few months later, I'm walking around the show floor at the Macworld conference in New York when I bump into the former tech support guy and former web developer. We spent a few minutes catching up, and then the tech support guy grins and says, "So, do you know what happened? Why everyone quit?" Me? "No, but I've certainly been curious. The owner didn't tell me and I didn't want to pry." Tech? "He and his wife got excommunicated." Me, blank stare. Tech, "Didn't you know we're all Jehovah's Witnesses?" Apparently everyone knew each other from church, and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to have anything to do with people who have been excommunicated. It wasn't until years later that I learned that the owner and his wife were swingers, and someone in the church found out. Plot twist. Listen, I don't think anyone should be excluded from a workplace for their private lifestyle choices if everyone was consenting adults and they weren't hurting anyone, but at least it makes for a good story. You remember Walden Books, the store in the mall? I had a friend who worked there as a store manager. They hired him to clean up the store. It was a total wreck. Dozens of unopened shipment boxes crammed in the back room, behind the cash wrap, even under shelves. He found new releases from 3 months back that were never available to buy. It was really, really bad. On top of that, the district manager who hired him told him he had 3 weeks to get the store in order without extra hours and without sales dropping. If you've worked in retail before, you know that this is impossible. My friend argues with the DM, and the DM basically tells him that he doesn't care if they work off the clock to get it done, it will be done, or he'll turn the entire staff. Fire them. So for 3 weeks, my friend and his staff worked 24/7, only clocking in for allotted shifts. My friend would even sleep in the back room in a sleeping bag, and miracle upon miracles, he got it cleaned up before the deadline. The deadline comes and the DM comes back with 2 LP operatives. They start pulling the staff one by one to the back and grill them until they get them to admit to working off the clock. When they get to my friend, she tells them outright that the DM told him to do it, and the DM sat there and denied the whole thing. So he says to the LP guys, "How else would we get this done with the deadline time allotted? You know what the store looked like before, and you know how much time we had." The LP guys just looked at each other and then fired the entire staff. That same day, a manager and 3 associates were hired. The DM already had them in the wings and was just waiting for my friend to get the store in working order to pass it off to his friend.
Parents, have any of you regretted the names you have given your children? I used to work tech support with a guy whose name was Gandalf. In the 70s, when he was born, Tolkien wasn't even a nerd thing. It was a hippie thing. His parents were big hippies and loved the books, so they named him Gandalf. His sister's middle name is Galadriel. He said at first people rarely recognized the name. It was a weird name, sure, but few people knew he was named after a fictional wizard, until the movies came out. He hates Peter Jackson. Well, for one thing, leave Peter Jackson alone. The only people that individual has to blame are their parents. And the other thing is, I don't know, maybe it's because I grew up with a name that is very nice, but people bullied me and ridiculed me for it for years. But I don't know. I think Gandalf could work. I think they can make it work. 12 years ago, we had twin boys. We knew one would be Thomas after my wife's uncle, but struggled to name the second. For about 28 hours, he was baby B, when we finally settled on Jeremiah. 2 days later, we introduced them to our pastor, and he said, "Oh, cute, Tom and Jerry." I looked at my wife, and we were both thinking, oh, we did not just do that, but we left it. My God, the fights those brothers must have had. My friend's parents met during the 60s, and they were/are crazy hippies, and they have practiced a lot of different religions. When my friend was born, they decided to give him 14 middle names: Dorsey, Abdul, Jaleel, Francis, Brian, Albert, Barney, Willie, Kowalski, Jeffrey, Faith, Lovestar, Breeze. He has a common first and last name, and they said all of that at graduation. Well, goddamn, they might have practiced a lot of different religions, but clearly the son took on Christianity because he honored the crap out of the name his mother and father gave him. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's a middle name. It's avoidable. I work in a social services agency that deals with children. The names I have seen are quite amazing. Along with random variations of names and brands of alcohol, you get some interesting biblical ones too. Like the 3 kids in one family named Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. The one that I cringed at the most, though, was this poor little girl named Erotica. They are not even giving her a chance. Oh, this makes me wonder if maybe there should be rules where it's like, oh, what's your baby's name? Oh, it's Erotica. Oh, I'm sorry, man, but this baby is immediately being taken to Child Protective Services. I think my mother regrets my name. She wanted to call me Sebastian, but my grandmother insisted she would call me Sebastart, but with a D. She caved and named me Joshua. So when we had our first son, we named him Sebastian. I've never seen my mother so happy. My grandmother calls him by his middle name. I think I'm more interested in the story of why grandmother hates the name Sebastian so much. Is it the name of a lover who scorned her, a mortal enemy, a dog she didn't like? There was a kid at my school called Internet Castle. This is not a joke, by the way. Internet Castle. Hopefully none of these people like giving out absolute full names or anything like that, but I can't help but worry a little bit, and maybe the producers will confirm this with me or not, but are we kind of doxing people by reading these? Well, my mother doesn't regret naming me Shaw. Doesn't seem so bad because it's a fair family name. But as my first name, it causes great confusion. For example, if I introduce myself to someone, I have to clarify that my name isn't actually Sean or Shaw. Then, of course, the conversation goes as follows. Yeah, it's spelled S-H-A-W. And they say, are you sure? Which sounds exactly like, are you sure in my regional accent. He drops an F-bomb at the end of this, but there's no real good supplement for an F-bomb just on its own. I work at a clinic with parental moms. Once baby is born, I help make sure they're coming in for appointments. I can't tell you the feelings I felt trying to schedule an appointment for Brenpen, the newborn. I mean, Brenpen sounds a bit silly, but I don't think anything's gonna beat naming your little girl Erotica. Like, it's gonna take something real bad for me to be like, yeah, that's worse than Erotica. My actual first name is Jeff. People think I'm from New Zealand and I'm saying Jeff. Thanks, Mom and Dad. It could still be worse. Consider your initials carefully. My surname begins with a W. My brother had a daughter and named her Jennifer Elizabeth. Pretty vanilla, huh? They got a ton of blankets and cups with Jew embroidered, engraved on each piece. We aren't Jewish. That's pretty funny, yeah. My wife regrets my kid's initials, FCK, but I think his pickup line choices could be hilarious. My initials are FCK. All I need is you. Okay, yeah, that's really good, actually. Almost on topic, my Nigerian friend was telling me that when he was teaching in Louisiana, the black people would come up and ask him if their names meant anything back in Africa. Apparently, 2 African Americans were named after furniture, but he was nice about it and said something like Proud Lion and Lord of Many. Line of them was probably for the best, but I'm just picturing him looking them in the eye and be like, you are footstool. My middle name is My Love. It's not my first name, but it still stuns people when I first tell them. That was a little ha-ha at the end, and I just felt like doing a Scooby-Doo laugh. My mother and stepfather picked out and agreed upon a name for my little sister while my mom was pregnant. Her middle name was supposed to be Kate. Stepman never said anything about it. He liked it, was fine with it. Baby gets born, birth certificate is being written out, mom's exhausted, so she lets baby's dad deal with it. A few weeks later, mom takes a look at the new social security card and birth certificate and flips her lid because the middle name on all this paperwork is Lay, even though that name had never come up in discussion. She didn't even know until she stumbled across it by accident quite a bit too late. My parents are hippies that grew up in the 70s. Thankfully, I got away with a reasonable name. Jem. I've seen Jem in the holograms. My 2 younger brothers are named Conan and Torald. Our parents have never expressed regret over any of our names, though. I'm a guy, and my parents were inspired by Harper Lee when naming me. They were really hoping for a girl, and the first choices for names were Kitty or Jem with a G. My dad said they didn't think of any boy names until after I was born. Then they remembered the character in To Kill a Mockingbird and changed Jem to J-E-M. Voila! Torald. A pretty cool name. And what is with these hippies naming their kids after fictional characters? I mean, even I have a name that's like kind of, it's not specifically, but you know, I share a name with a few popular fictional characters. My first name is just a letter. It gets better. I have an identical twin brother, and his first name is also a letter. We each have normal middle names, but letters is first names. It's because my dad thought it looked elegant, and not typical letters. I'm talking about 3 of the last letters. Thanks, Dad. Filling out any sort of paperwork for damn near anything is a pain in the butt. I know I can change my name, but I don't want to go through that hassle when I'm already used to the crappy name I was given. To answer OP's question, my dad doesn't regret it, but my mom wishes he would have waited until after the epidural wore off from her C-section to name us. The names are X and Z, so much for privacy. I posted this as a reply, but I thought I should address the justified claims indicating my mom might have gone along with the letters X and Z as first names. So I asked my mom why she was out. She's 5 foot and 95 pounds, she's an emergency room physician, and when the day arrived for my twin and I to be born, she didn't have any contractions. Typically, twins aren't carried full term, but here we are 9 months later in full term. The obstetrician decided that a cesarean would be the safest choice considering my mother was 40 at the time. The anesthesiologist administered the epidural, but it was too large a dose for my mom, seeing as she's such a tiny person. When my mother was having a hard time breathing, she told the anesthesiologist that she knew the area above the diaphragm had been numbed and started to panic because she couldn't breathe, and so the anesthesiologist administered a dose of Valium, so my mom became unconscious. When she awoke, she realized for the first time that my dad definitely married up. I ain't even gonna say anything about the names. In fact, overall, I'm not gonna insult people for the names that they're given or anything. The worst one so far, as I've said, it's erotica. It's still gonna be erotica by the end of this, I imagine. But goddamn, what's with these men and just not discussing with their wives what they're gonna name their children or just going rogue? A friend's middle name is Baldrick. His parents thought it would be funny after watching too much Blackadder. For the uninitiated, Blackadder is a really funny English television series set around the 1500s because Queen Elizabeth is a main character in it, and then there was Blackadder Goes Forth, where it's set in the trenches of World War II. Anyway, Baldrick is basically a massive idiot who usually screws things up, or maybe inadvertently kinda helps in his own stupid way. My legal name was Carne Asada Jones. I had it changed at 18. They basically called him Sliced Beef, for those who don't know. You know what? I'm actually gonna give that name second place for worst name on this list. It's still behind erotica, but not bad, not bad. My friend and her brother are from Taiwan. When they moved to Australia, they were young. Their father chose Western-sounding names for them. My friend ended up with a relatively normal, if old-fashioned name, but he got her brother's name from a thesaurus. His name is Roget. Also, my ex's sister was born in Ethiopia, and whoever filled out the birth certificate must not have had very good English because her name has about 4 times as many vowels as it strictly needs. And once I saw a girl working in a fast food restaurant with a name tag that read alimony. I have a mate whose name is Irwin. Not horrible, but his brother's is Irvin. Okay, personally, I gotta say, I actually really like the name Roget. I think that sounds cool, but Owen, there's nothing wrong with the name, and Irvin is fine too, I guess, but when I hear the name Owen, all I'm getting are flashes of that kid from bloody Billy and Mandy. My best friend named her firstborn son Jaden. When she told me the name, I asked her if she really wanted to do that. She said yes. That and her husband liked the name but wanted to make it a little different by adding an additional N. She now regrets it. The fact that she regrets it shouldn't bring me joy, but it does. Good luck on those biz cards, little guy. I am not quite sure what's actually wrong with that name. It looks a little bit silly on paper, I guess, but everyone in the comments below even is just oh, this name sucks. I knew a girl in high school named Cassiopeia. People called her Cass for short. I got why she was named that. Her dad was an astronomer by profession. There's not a single thing wrong with that name. It's kind of cute, if anything. I once knew a guy in high school whose last name was Sweat, and the poor dude's parents made his first name Richard. That's right. Connect the dots. See, I don't think that's that bad really, because it's just the nickname that everyone knows goes with that for some reason, but that's not their name. But, of course, it is unfortunate. My ex and I had a great marriage until it fell apart 14 years in. Up to that point, the worst thing we ever fought about was baby names and paint colors. She wanted our first to be Zebulon Zachariah. Not even kidding. We fought and fought about it. She was dead serious, and I was completely baffled as to how she thought that was a good idea. Finally talked her into a more sane first name and conceded Zachary as a middle name. Second child, she wanted D'Artagnan. Little Dart, she would say. Oh, hell no. We fought over this one while she was in labor. On the way to the hospital. She wasn't giving up. I won that one too with something not common but sane at least. Third child, she was back on the D'Artagnan train, fought for 9 solid months. Thank God that one was a girl. Okay, Zebulon, kinda ridiculous, but D'Artagnan, ooh, Dart. Darty boy, D'Artagnan, my friend. Nah, D'Artagnan sounds cold as fur. Like maybe you could shorten Zebulon to just Zeb. That sounds kinda cool. Just Zeb though. Do not put Zebulon on the birth certificate. I went to a summer camp with a guy called Raymond. Seriously, first name Raymond, second name Raymond. Naturally, we gave him hell for it. Me. So, were your parents drunk or something? Raymond squared. I was named after a very well-respected relative, actually. Me. So, were his parents drunk? He didn't talk to me much after that. 10 out of 10 roasting, I'll give you that, but see, this is why I don't really make fun of people's names or anything like that, because you do not control your name when you are born. I'm not going to take the mick out of someone for something that they didn't have a choice in. My husband and I had a deal. If it was a girl, I got to pick, and if it was a boy, he did. Our son's name is Loki. I'm not a big fan, but he loves it. I keep hoping it will grow on me. Norse god of mischief? You're just asking for a little Hellraiser at that point. Now I got that picture of the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy in my head, where Billy goes to Valhalla and Loki is like this skinny guy, like pulling on an elastic band, and Odin goes, Loki, remember what happened last time, as he points to his eye. Yeah, all you normies will bring up Marvel or something, but frankly, I'm so totally goddamn done with Marvel. We named our daughter Isabel because it was a name on both of our lists that matched. We wanted a long name, something regal but could be shortened up. We talked about Elizabeth, Victoria, those sort of names. Decided on Isabel. My only regret is we did this as Twilight was dying down and everyone assumed her name was Isabella, even after I spelt it out over the phone for them several times, with an E on the end, Isabel. People would ask and still ask, do you call her Bella? That'd be so cute. No, shut the hell up. You know what? That would actually, that'd be kind of infuriating. Not a parent, and sort of the opposite here. My brother and his then-fiancé were about to have a kid, and they argued about the name all the way to the delivery room. He wasn't around when they had to do the paperwork for the baby's name, and he was upset when she named their son Logan. I mentioned to him that it's not a terrible name. After all, it's Wolverine's name. About a week or so later, I hear him on the phone with a friend talking about how he didn't like the name until he realized that his kid is named after Wolverine. Logan. Strong, manly name. It's a name you gotta live up to, though. My wife and I have a daughter that we named Jordan. I'm fine with that. My wife is a very independent woman, and Jordan is kind of a strong name for a girl. Now we're thinking about having another kid, and if it's a boy, she wants to name him Michael. Jordan and Michael. Michael and Jordan. I'm 6'7", she's 6'3", and both very white. She somehow thinks it won't be weird if our most likely tall children are named after freaking Michael Jordan. I don't want to be answering questions or listening to jokes about their names for the next 20 years, though. I don't really get this dude's damage, to be honest. I mean, is that what people are gonna think about when you hear them or call them? It's like, Michael Jordan. Yeah, people are gonna think it, but it's like, whatever, who gives a crap? I have a friend from high school who has 4 kids. Oldest is Landon, perfectly normal if very popular. Second is Caden, getting more odd, but still in the realm of normal. Third and only girl is Kensley. Now you're just making things up. And she's due any day with her 4th, Brogan. I really hope they are done since the names are getting progressively worse. My cousin also just had a baby, and I have no idea how to pronounce the name. Ellie, best guess is like Ellie, but no one can confirm this. Okay, well, earlier I said that you can name your kids whatever you want and stuff, just don't make it erotica or anything like that. It's like the people earlier saying Jaden with a double N at the end and stuff like that. I don't get the point of naming your kids pretty regular stuff, but being like, it's going to be a regular name, but I'm going to add different letters to it so it just sounds the same. And it's like, what's the point? I guess this will get buried, but this thread seems to be filled with not answers to the question. So I named my oldest daughter Darian because my husband, then we were 17 and very stupid, wanted to call the baby Damien. And this was my compromise because I wasn't naming a child after the demon child in The Omen. Also, there was a female DJ on the radio at the time called Darian, so I thought it would work. Well, it turns out that Darian is most often a boy's name and very often a black name. My daughter is in her 20s now, and she has never let me live it down. Everywhere she goes, people expect a black man. She's a nerdy, short, white chick. I swear I had good intentions. I was literally just thinking to myself as I read that Darian's more of a boy's name, isn't it? Used to work with a girl named Latrina. Latrine jokes constantly. Any name that has an easy joke to make is a bad idea. Poor kid is going to hear it 1,000 times. Oh boy, howdy, do I know that feeling. 50 years ago, the family a few doors down from me had a son. They called him Boyd. His surname is George. They are fundamentalist Christians. Bet they regretted that. So rather than Boy George, it's Boyd George? In Chile, we have an urban legend that in Valparaiso, one of our main port cities, there are many kids named Usnavi. Why, you ask? Well, being a port city, it is host to ships from worldwide navies from time to time, including the U.S. Navy. Legend says that any girl who gets pregnant after a night of party with a U.S. Navy sailor names her child with the name tag his theoretical father had, and that tag says U.S. Navy, hence the name Usnavi. If that is actually true, that's really interesting. I found a Verizon bill on the ground one time. Figured I would dispose of it in case it had any important information. Guy's name was Michael Michaels. Little bit silly, but definitely memorable. Not a parent myself, but I tried to warn my friend that everyone was going to be naming their kid Jacob because of the damn Twilight movie, and she was cursing her kid to years of sharing classes with other people of the same name. Her and I both have very common names for our age group, and she agreed that it was really annoying. And she also hates those Twilight movies, but she stuck to Jacob nonetheless. Sure enough, Jacob was the #1 most common name for the year her Jacob was born. Poor baby Jacob. Poor all baby Jacobs. Don't name your baby Jacob. I think this personal vendetta for the name Jacob goes beyond the Twilight movies. My mom was going to name me Tawny, as in Tawny Kitane, or better known as the chick from that Whitesnake video. It was the late 80s and my mom was 17. She didn't go through with it because when I was born, I didn't look like a Tawny. My brother was named after Samuel Adams. No, not one of the founding fathers of the United States, but after the beer. I don't think they regret it. I just think it's interesting to share. Yeah, I gotta admit, I'm not really feeling Tawny either.
My mom wanted to name me Stuffin'. What the hell is a stuffin'?
I don't know, bro. Maybe she just thought it was cute. My wife is fortunately somewhat more sensible than me and vetoed all of my wacky name choices, so I do not have a Shamalar, nor a River, Temperance, Winfred, or a Ford. I'm still a bit sore about Winfred and River, but I do concede that she had a point with the rest in hindsight. I was allowed more leeway with the middle names, and my eldest has the middle name Neris, as in Major Kira, which would be fine except that it's spelled exactly the same as a Welsh name, which is pronounced Neris, which is entirely not what I was going for. My son's middle name is Zed, so when anyone asks him what the Z in his name stands for, he can say Zed, which I thought at the time was really cool. Then sometime thereafter I came to the conclusion that it was stupid. Now I don't know what I think. He seems to like it though. Oh, and my daughter whose middle name is Storm is afraid of thunder and lightning. That last bit is pretty cute. Also, I don't know, I think some of the names this guy comes up with sound pretty cool. Not the namer, but the named. My rents named me Andrew, but it was recorded as Adnaru. Apparently, my mother noticed soon after, but didn't actually care. She then lost my birth certificate, so I never knew. I found out when I got it replaced trying to get my license. I had to file court papers and everything to get it changed, and she thought the whole thing was hilarious. So no, my parents didn't regret anything. This has got me paranoid about my own birth certificate now. I'm an Andrea and I'm a guy. The half Italian explains it. Didn't help growing up in West Virginia. Hey, that's a girl's name. Not in Italy, I explain over and over. I never had much of a nickname, but I'm pretty sure it's really stunted my life. People can't remember it or they say it wrong because they just don't believe it. It's definitely a big problem. Not as much as I live in New York City, but still doesn't help. What was she thinking? She's only third generation, too. She should know naming a boy a common girl's name in West Virginia was an awful idea. I know I keep alluding to my name and stuff, and this isn't about me, but I also suffered with people insulting me and telling me that I had a girl's name or likening my name to a girl's name. So yeah, this one kind of hits home for me. I know a guy whose name is Tony, but it is spelled Tony. That is so freaking dumb. No, that's the worst name. That's the worst name. For a smidgen of context for those of you who maybe don't understand, their name is spelled Toeknee. It's dumb. That's so dumb. My dad wanted to change my name when I was about 6 months old because everyone at work was giving him so much crap. My mom's name is Pat. My dad's name is Rick. My name is Patrick. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.